Okay, so we're gonna call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so then we just have to announce that the meeting is being recorded by Norton Media and Norton Public Schools. Somebody here else will be recording, so there. Okay, so the minutes, you guys all had a chance to look at them.
Yep.
Yes.
Any questions, comments, changes?
Nope.
No.
Yes.
Were you even here?
No.
Oh, okay.
Was not. The Thursday, December 14th meeting. The reason I know that there's changes because I was not there, and Pledge of Allegiance Chairman Salas absolutely not announced that.
That's a good catch. Oh, okay. We can change that.
That's
Okay,
all.
all right, so do we have a motion to approve the minutes? I guess we have to do them separately, right?
Yes.
For the November 13th, joint meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So it's 4-0-1.
All
right, and-
We're all done.
Dinesh said he
You
wasn't.
were at the joint meeting?
No, Dinesh was not.
And then, do we have a motion to approve the December 14th meeting minutes?
With the
Oh, with the amendment, yes, that Dinesh did not,
So moved.
yeah, you did not announce the meeting was being recorded.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We'll wait on you, Nick.
I'll
All
give you a
those in
second.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. All right, so now we have the warrants.
Skip it to 2024.
So I reviewed and approved the following warrants: school expense warrants, December 14th, 2023, $380,502.36. December 27th, 2023, $369,398.54. School payroll warrants, December 14th, 2023, $1,302,490.07. And December 28th, 2023, $1,174,967.72. I wish to enter them into public records. Student rep update.
Antonia's running a little bit late.
Okay.
Come back to you.
Yeah, you want to do that?
Can we-
Yeah, sure. All right, so discussion and vote on acceptance of new member districts to Reed's Collaborative.
Okay, so, as required, we are part of the Reads Collaborative, which is a special education collaborative located in Middleborough. It is required that anytime one of the collaboratives that we're a member of, accepts a new member district, it is the responsibility of each member school committee to approve them. So I have to read the specific language. At the Reed's Board of Directors meeting on November 16th, by a majority vote, the board members voted to allow admittance of 2 new schools, the Brockton Public School District and the Whitman-Hanson Regional Public School District, to Reed's Collaborative. This vote is subject to the majority vote of 2/3 of the Reed's Collaborative member school committees. Pursuant to Section 9, the procedure and timeline for admitting new member districts as outlined in the Reed's Collaborative. Norton Public Schools, by a vote of the school committee, will need to approve the admittance of Brockton schools. Which, Sherry, you just have to read where it says as outlined in the collaborative, Reed's Collaborative agreement, and as part of your motion. Please.
Okay, so just a motion,
Yep.
is there a motion to approve acceptance of new member districts to Reed's Collaborative? Is that all I have to read?
That's fine. Yep.
Okay,
So.
is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
So question about grades, just as we're
Yes.
talking about it. How do they gauge which district has, like, does Brockton automatically have more placements than Norton? Like, how do they differentiate who gets what placement? Or is it
That's a great
first
question.
come, first served?
It's kind of first come, first serve. Brockton wouldn't get a large majority of the placements, just, and that was something we talked about because Brockton is so much bigger than a place like Norton. It really depends on what the needs of the individual districts are at the time. Kind of first come, first serve, and they would have a limit of how many seats they could actually take.
So like a current student doesn't get bumped out.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Review and discuss capital improvement plan for spring town meeting. You're up, Christine.
So we had a change for the,
Thank
to discuss, again, the spring meeting, capital improvement, and that is, we made a change with, our priorities. We had a minibus lease on there, final payment for 22,000, and we have taken that out, and we have put in as priority one, JCS elevator repair. We had a state inspection that came in the fall. And after that inspection, they came up with a preventative maintenance item that we needed to tend to, which was the, in the back information that we provided, which was the hydraulic cylinder, needs to be replaced. And the reason for that is in case fluid leaks from it, there's no tray or anything catching that at the bottom of the elevator shaft, so it will go into the soil and contaminate it. So, because the building was built, in 1978, they didn't, have the trade there at that time. So, we put it on now because we wanted to talk to the town, talk to Mike and James to ask, how they thought we should go forward with this, because we also need to get a 90-day extension from the state. So once we got, once we were confident after talking with the elevator company that we were gonna get this, and talking with the town, this was the direction that they suggested that we go in as well. We did say that we could help supplement the cost of $30,000 for facilities. So it will not be that full 68,760. It will be the difference of supplement. The rest is the same. It's still the second exit at the Norton Middle School, and still the K through curriculum that we are still fitting.
So what are we doing with the minibus?
We made that payment. It was due, because it was due, sooner. And we knew that they weren't gonna wait till the Springtown meeting to pay it.
Okay.
That we made the, 22,000.
Okay. Alright. Any questions on this?
Did you get more than one quote, or do we have like a contract with Buckley, or?
We have a contract with Buckley, but if this is, when we do start this, we get the extension from the state, we're gonna go out and get more quotes, just to make sure that that's, yeah. Yep.
Is the elevator in good working use or is it
Yes.
like offline right
Nope, it's in good work use. We needed the extension so that they didn't, have a hold on the other.
If we were not able to get that extension from the state before we had the work done, they would close down the elevator, which is obviously a difficult thing for us to do with our students and staff that may need the elevator at any time. So thankfully they gave us that 90-day extension.
now? Do we, I'm assuming here, we have the extension, because this just dated October 19th.
Yeah, so you have originally 90 days to,
Got extension.
next, so we have up to 180 days to do this work.
Tick,
Yes,
tick.
yes.
All right, cool. And then so we're going to, I guess from the town side of things, we're going to, Norton Public Schools will fund $30,000.
Yeah.
The town will be on the hook for the 38
That's correct.
change.
Yeah, so, they advised us to put the full 68 on there and just acknowledge that we're gonna kind of.
To make sure that one of the cost things.
Yeah, yeah.
So then we'll get additional quotes after this, hopefully the state gives us the extension.
Yeah.
Now, what happens if the state doesn't give us? the
We already received it.
Beautiful. Great. Perfect. Good.
Anything else?
Maybe ask this before. Have we always put curriculum?
Historically, we did, until we were able to.
So you knew I was gonna ask that question.
Well, because we
You-
talked.
you
I
had
think
that
the
answer
last time,
queued up.
last time you brought it up.
We did, yeah, so we did talk about at the last meeting.
All right, so that's why I said. it.
Historically, we always put curriculum on capital plans, and we went through a very rote cycle with, subject areas to the capital planning committee, so one year it was ELA pre-K to 12, everyone would get new materials and so on. Once we started bringing in some school choice money, we were able to use school choice funds for that. Unfortunately, with the majority of our school choice funding tied up in staffing, we'll no longer have that flexibility.
All right, so we haven't seen it. So,
Yes.
Okay. gotcha.
Anything else on that? Okay. Are you guys ready? You wanna-
Yeah,
okay.
sorry about that.
No, no worries at all.
All right, so starting off with the JCS is excited to welcome artist Joshua Weiner to the school next week for a 3-week residency at JCS.
Using drawings from the students, Mr. Weiner has developed a plan for a large-scale mosaic mural in the library that celebrates a love for literature and the natural surroundings of JCS and Norton. JCS students, parents, and Wheaton students, and hopefully some NHS students as well, will work with Josh on piecing together all of the mosaics to create a lasting piece of art that families can enjoy for years to come. Many thanks to the JCS parents, organization, and need for funding this project. Prior to that, we will be having our annual Martin Luther King Assembly, which is focused on peace and acceptance. Music, poetry, and slideshows will usher the JCS community into this weekend's important holiday.
So from the middle school, NMS Drama Club is proud to announce that the production for this year will be Willy Wonka. Students are excited about this news and are eager for auditions to take place next week. NMS sports are enjoying success this winter, with both basketball teams winning on a consistent basis, along with hockey and wrestling seeing success on the ice and mat as well. NMS is proud to be welcoming a very special guest speaker on January 24th, Miss Ivy Watts. Ivy Watts is an inspirational guest speaker who meets with the school groups all around the country to discuss the perils of depression and suicide ideation. Ivy is being brought to our school through a generous grant from Sarah's Village and additional funds from the NMS Parent Board. Lastly, NMS will be hosting our seventh annual 7th grade midway social next Friday for 7th grade only. This special event marks the halfway or midpoint on the calendar of their careers here at NMS.
And for the Yale, students are beginning to get super excited for our HAY PTO Boostathon fundraiser to begin. Free registration for the fun run started on January 10th. The Boostathon on-campus personnel will be working with our staff next week to build in incentives for our students. Then from our big kickoff day on Wednesday, January 24th, with the Boostathon happening January 24th through February 2nd, with our Glow Fun Run happening in the gym on Friday, February 2nd throughout the day. This is the big fundraiser we do for the year, which will help us pay for the new playground structures we purchased last year. We are still working on paying them off. The kids have little incentives each day to earn fun privileges throughout, and then the big incentive of raising $20,000 will be for Mr. Gigan and Mr. Balawa to do something fun and a little crazy. In past years, we've kissed pigs, exotic animals, including a kangaroo, and last year, dueling as Yell Knights. We can't wait to see what we are going to have to do this year.
From the high school students at the high school are looking forward to the new semester of new classes as well as some great events. Right after break, 55 NHS DECA members competed at district competitions in Hyannis. Our team did Norton proud. An amazing 40 competitors finished in the top 10 of their events, and 26 students qualified for state competition in March, with top 6 finishes. Excellent work. The talent show is on January 25th with singing, dancing, improv, and music. Also on Saturday, February 3rd, the high school will host a vendor fair for entrepreneurial students and members of the community to show off products and services. That's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Anybody have anything? Thank you. All right, so, big capital, FY 25 budget update. Seeing you.
So what you have in front of you is our level service budget request. Our final budget for FY 24 was $34,706,443. We have an increase of $4,166,987 for our proposed budget of $38,873,431, which is 12.01%. This is the first time in several years that we don't have the federal relief money. So the increase is higher. On the next page that you have is the breakdown of what makes up this $4 million increase. The very first item is our salaries and contractual obligations, which makes up $2.6 million. And that is without the supplement that we got from ESSER money. What makes up the contract obligations is our teachers' contracts right for FY 25, which is 2.75%. Our para average increase for 7.5%. Our admin assistants for 2%, and plus their extra days for data custodials, contract 4%, the rest of our salary lines are levels. The next are our added district increases. The first one is just our added district tuition for 772,313. And the next is our added district special ed transportation increase for 348,400. And these two added district increases alone make up $1.1 million of our. The next is 73,000, which is our special education expenses. And this is other programs that we have, tutoring and other various services. The next is our transportation for 46,000, which we had a 4.5% increase, and that's just going up the past several years. We are going out this year, so that may change for contracts. And then we have $50,000 increase in homeless transportation, which is much higher than we have budgeted in the past, but we also have spent close to $200,000 in the past several years. And then the next is our $78,000 for the operation maintenance, which that is our management cost, which is our maintenance contract, custodial supplies, and other utility lines. And the remaining 187, so that is just our unanticipated special ed contingency funds that we have, or other unexpected costs that might arise.
Do we have the number of what the special education mandates are going to be? So for example, if our budget is $38 million, how much of that is mandated that we can't adjust at all?
Yes.
The mandated amount makes up about 39% of our total budget. So all of the, we didn't break it out yet into the two different budgets that you typically see, because it is all in that line by line budget that we gave you in the background. But separated out, it is $15 million.
So the increase in special education itself is $2,032,446. That is just the special education,
You said that number one more time, sorry.
$2,032,446, sorry.
Okay.
That is just, so that's special education staff, not increased staff. There are no new staff members in that number there. Tuitions and transportation, as well as services for students. It's roughly 39%. So the overall special education budget is $15,049,963, which is nearly 39% of our overall budget.
And it's a 15%, roughly 15% increase from last year.
13.5.
So we have an increase of 13.5% from fiscal year 24 that we're anticipating in fiscal year 25. Where is those mandates coming from? Why is it that much increased? Is it different legislation? Is it kind of, what is that? I guess from a taxpayer standpoint, why is it going up that much?
So that was
What
why we
mandates
wanted
are-
to really include this page for you. We felt like it was really important for everyone to be able to see, like, okay, we started $34,706,443. How do we get from that point to the 38 million and change that we're asking from? I'm a very concrete, logical thinker, and for me, I thought, we talked about this at length. We need to show people how these numbers are adding up. So Nick, to your point, in this first line here, this $2.6 million worth of salaries, those are special education staff members as well. So
That's,
You're-
so, let me just stop, that's all staff members.
that is all
What
staff.
schools is that person?
Yes, that is.
Break that. Right.
So that, our question, would we want to see that in general education versus special education, so you guys can see? We can do that for you as well. But for the first pass, we wanted to give you a general overview. Okay, so that is contractual obligations for our teachers, for our paraprofessionals, for custodial administrators, administrative assistants. That is every staff member and what their contractual increases. This year, we're currently using $500,000 of ESSER funds. So off the top, that number is $500,000 higher than it would have been if we weren't losing those funds. The number of students that are receiving special education services or that have needs that are more significant to put them within a specialized program or in an out-of-district placement, those numbers are larger than they were in the past. This is no new regulations, really no new staff. It's just the increased costs of what it takes to do business and to make sure that our students are getting the supports that they need.
And we don't have any control or any say on a collaborative tuition or anything like that. So like,
No,
so I guess my question, so if I had a big building and I started a collaborative, I could say everyone that wants to come here pays me $45,000. Like, how does that, I
so
guess?
that's voted by
work?
the boards. So like, as your representative to the Reeds Board and the FICO Board, we vote each year on what that increase will be based on the, you know, what it's costing them to run their buildings, whatever their needs are. And it's typically between 3% and 5%. I believe this year FICO said it's probably gonna be about 3.5%. We have not heard about the increase from Reeds yet. However, last year, at the state level, they approved a 14% increase for private placements for students as part of the OSD. And that was traditionally very succinct in terms of like anywhere from 2 to 5%. 14 was a huge, huge increase. So now we're, as Dinesh says every year, that compounds. So we're paying on top of that.
I wonder if Dan is, again, I'm sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I wonder if he's, what he's driving at is, so what's the oversight that 14% is the right number? So is it based on some type of budgeted costs that they can show? These private institutions, are they for-profit, not-for-profit, nonprofit? What, so, you know, where's the check and balance, I guess? If it's,
And for us, unfortunately, all of that happens at the state level, and as a school committee and as a superintendent, we have no control over it at all. Kristen, can you tell me,
So-
can you just share with them the OSD information?
Yeah, so the OSD sets the rates for, and they're kind of the oversight agency for the Commonwealth. So they're the ones that work with private schools and set the rates. So,
What's OSD, sorry?
Operation Service Division.
and they separate on a school-by-school basis, or they approve?
Statewide,
So they just say 14% is the right number.
for everyone.
Everybody's costs are up 14% this year. It's amazing. Nobody had a different, you know, nobody had less than you.
Yeah, or they say on average, or whatever they say. Well, last year was 14, what if they have the,
But it matters, right? You
Oh,
can't say
absolutely.
On average, because what if my costs were up 18%? I'm not saying that they should be. What if they were? So now as that private institution, I can't run this sped program. I mean, that's, I don't know.
So I guess my other question to Dinesh's point, when we look at placement of our students versus, you know, in a collaborative environment like a Reeds or a FICO versus a private setting, do we have that number of who's at a collaborative, like just numbers?
Yes, we
and
do.
who's at? And so I know we had talked about, you know, some students in, you know, special facilities, things like that. Is that what we're considering, like those specialized facilities?
So what we always do, and I'm sorry, Vinny, in case you aren't here, so people have other family obligations. The way that it always works is we always start with our local collaboratives, especially those that we're members of. So for Reeds, for example, Reeds and FICO, those are the two the collaboratives that we're members of. We always start there to see if they have a program that meets the needs of the student that we're looking for a placement for. And oftentimes they do, and we're able to work with them. It also depends on if they have space available for that student as well, if they can meet the student's needs. If they are not able to accommodate that student for whatever reason, we typically go out to other collaboratives looking for places that have programs, but also aren't extremely far away, right? Because then we also have to transport our students, and it's not good for any students to be on the bus or in a van for a long period of time each day. From there, we go to private settings that are closer to make sure that they have a program that is appropriate for the student. It's all a team-based decision. So at the end of the day, it's the team that will recommend placement. And the parents will go out and visit it, make sure it's appropriate place for their child. And they can also say, you know, yes, we really like this, or, you know, we don't think this is a great fit, and these are the reasons why. So it's oftentimes it takes quite a while to find a placement for a student, and we're working with that student and that family day to day in order to make sure that's the best place for them.
So if a student goes to a collaborative, say, end of September, and then, I know they have their goals and they meet their, and so on and so forth. How does the cost work if, say, they meet all their goals and they're back in district, say, in March? Like, how do those numbers, like, do we get a credit or, like, how does it, I guess my question is, if we know our X number, September 1st is this, but say March 1st, we have 20 less kids at collaboratives because they've met their goals and achieved what we want them to achieve.
Very aggressive, a number there.
No, I'm just saying, I'm trying to figure out
How that works.
how the history of it,
Yeah.
just to get a grasp on, we can't control the cost, but we want our students to be successful.
Absolutely.
So just how does that work with costs? Like, do we just stop paying or is it like I know our reimbursement number is like the year after or something like that. October 1st, whatever it is. So
I'm gonna let Seth go into that for you.
So if they stop mid-year, if it's a collaborative, then you stop when they stop going. We stop paying, and then when we do the reimbursement for circuit breaker, we put in their end date. So like you said, it is hard to predict. We have students moving all the time, and then private school, depending on several factors, usually own it if they're jumping to different other private schools or districts, then you own it for the remainder of the year, whether or not they're still here. And then if they come back in district from private, which is a little less likely than I believe collaborative, than it happening collaborative, then they would have a stop end date that you would have to.
And I would assume that any of that, we try to do it so it makes sense in terms of like September, June,
Well, and
January, if possible.
it really depends on how each individual student is doing. So we have seen students come back in like a March timeframe because that was a natural point for them and for their services to come back into district. Sometimes we do say have families and say, we're gonna transition your child back in for the summer program and have them get to know the teacher and get to know the classroom and their peers before they transition fully back in September. It really just, it depends on the individual student.
And then I think my next thing of this too, is like, we have these increases. And sure, you have data and stuff to back it up, but I feel like we're shooting at a target with these numbers.
Yeah.
In pitch black, because we actually have no idea at the end of the day. This cost could be $348,000, it could be $200,000, it could be $1 million, correct? Or any of these really, because we really don't know until our students get here, who comes into district, who leaves district. So we are kind of shooting at it's a tough shot, if you will.
I think that's generally true, right? I mean, other than the
Yes.
contractual obligations, which we can
Correct.
So like,
kind of know. So, but I think that's right. If all of a sudden, everybody who was taking advantage of these programs left the district, the cost goes to zero. I mean, it's true.
unless they're being transported to another district.
Or we get in 10 kids from a different district and then the cost
It's
goes
a
through the
very
roof.
much moving target, but the numbers are based on,
What you're kind of.
yeah, so I'll let Christine explain exactly
that's
how we arrived at those numbers.
exactly, and the reason why that's a $1.1 million increase just in out of district, that's all current students that we have. Anticipating that the exact same students or ones that we have out in placements currently that we are not paying for yet, we anticipate them in FY '25. So, and then we already know the OSD increase for next year is 4.69%, which is still, it's not 14, but it's still second highest in the past decade. That's already calculated in, so we know about that. And then we always do an average around 5 for the collaboratives. So that is a small safety net. Some collaboratives come in a little lower, but the rest are current students just anticipating or ones that we are just like a private student that is in a different community now that that community owns, that we know we're going to own next year, that we don't currently have in there. That placement is for next year.
Then,
Can I differ?
Just sorry, jump in.
Can you find out what the approved private placement increases have been for the past 10 years?
I have. So they have been anywhere from 1% to 1.8, 1.5, 1.4, 1.8, 2.3, 1.6, 2.7, 2.2, 2.5, and 14, and then 4.6.
Okay, I mean, I gotta be honest with you, the 1.1 are not that bad.
No, sorry.
No, right.
That was back.
Wait,
Yeah.
That was,
Well, and that's why the 14
2012.
last year was so surprising to everyone.
Yeah.
You go from a place if you're having 1.2,
Yeah.
1.8,
Right.
2.2, and then all of a sudden you see this 14% number. It was a huge, huge issue last year, not just for Norton, but for everyone. It just came out of nowhere. And so now we're now dealing with that. And so, as Christine mentioned, even the 4.69 is a higher number than we're typically used to when it comes to these placements.
And I don't want to put either one of you on the spot, but I think the entire room here knows. Can we maybe just say it so everyone hears it, that like these numbers, because they do change a lot. Cuts may be made, and then things may be put back into the budget simply off of these numbers alone, never mind all the other budgeted stuff.
Well, if you like, we'll go to page 3
Yeah. I was gonna
and kind
say,
of talk about the realities of
Correct.
what we're working with here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Winsberg from afar. So I think for those of us who are familiar with Norton, know that coming forward, even at the first pass with a 12% increase is kind of out of this world. We know that is something that is very much atypical. We've had a lot of conversations with our town manager, Mr. Units, and with the treasurer, Mr. Polio, and we've had some really great conversations. And what Mike and James have told us is that, you know, we really should be looking more in the 3 to 5% range. And I asked him if I could share that information with you publicly, because it is public and it is being recorded. And he was fine with us sharing that information out loud. So 12% to 5% is very much a big difference. So Christine and I took a look at 5%. And so the difference between our 12% and potentially a 5% is about $2.4 million of cuts. So Ms. Winsberg, if you could scroll down a tiny bit more, as I know you want to say something.
Just remember we're live.
Yeah.
I will apologize ahead of time to anybody who's heard me say this for at least the last decade. At least the last decade I've been saying this. I don't know if it's the semantics of it or what. I don't understand what they're saying. Are they saying that we should pretend we only need 3 to 5%? Because that makes no sense to me whatsoever. We are presenting a budget that says, here's what we're doing now. Here's what we're doing now will cost next year. That is what a budget is. It makes no sense to me to pretend that we need 3%. I don't understand the rationale here. And I've said this before as well. This town thinks about its budget incorrectly. And I see you getting ready to laugh because you hear it every year.
We've had this conversation so many times.
I mean, I can't imagine a world where you would go through your own personal finances this way. Where you would say, okay, you know, we have whatever, we have a mortgage payment, we have electricity, gas to heat the house, we have car payments, we take vacations, we have food, we have whatever. And everything went up 10%. And my salary went up 5%. So what we're gonna do is, we're just gonna pay everything up 5%, and that's it. That makes no sense. Your mortgage company is gonna foreclose on your house. You probably should say, we're not taking vacations, right? Rather than just say, hey, let's just pretend our costs are only 5%. You need to sit down and say, okay, what are discretionary costs? What can we do? When we go to the supermarket and buy food, are we buying, whatever, I don't know, the premium,
Oreos
whatever,
or
yeah.
hot dogs?
We're buying, we're buying ring dings. Well, maybe we don't need ring dings. Maybe we should just buy regular, the regular food that we need for survival. I don't understand why we keep pretending somehow that we can just say, well, our costs only really went up 5% because that's all we have. That's not the case. At some point, we got to sit down as a town and prioritize what matters most to us. And I'm not saying it's going to be the schools, but why don't we at least have that basic conversation? And I would hope that this is not what's being done at the police and the fire level. I hope they're not saying to those guys, hey, pretend that police and fire will be fine with just 3%. I'd really like to know what they need to have, not what they can have. I think that's an important
So-
discussion to have, and we don't ever have that discussion.
So let's do that at the next joint meeting, which is this month. Let's have that conversation, because I think that from my point of view, I don't think they're saying that, it's only 3 or 5%. I think what they're saying is out of this small pie, because as a town, we've decided, live within your means. We've decided that for years,
Yep.
years and years and years. We laid it all out years ago, what departments needed. And still, nope, live within your means.
Yeah.
So here we are.
So-
Right, so the town manager, and listen, we can still have that discussion at a joint meeting, but I think that what they're saying is out of the small pie, this is what we can allocate to each department, because there's many departments that have needs.
And that's fine. I get that we are not gonna get allocated 12%, 10%, 8%. I absolutely get that. But not to tell the town that that is what we need is disingenuous. It is a lie.
Yep.
I didn't go to the joint meeting because had a work thing, but, there was conversation in the minutes about, we gotta make sure we're transparent. We're anything but transparent. We're the exact opposite. We're actually lying to the town. We're saying, hey, you know what? We don't really need a bunch of stuff. Hey, those English teachers that are gonna cut, yeah, we don't actually need those people. And anybody who's listening at home, I'm not saying we're cutting English teachers, that's an
Just to
example.
clarify.
Just an example. That's the problem here, is we don't actually have that conversation. Let's say, what's more important to us, A or B? A, B, or C? How do we rank them? What are we gonna do here? Maybe we cut C and give A extra. Maybe we cut C altogether. Maybe we don't have a whatever C is. I mean, it's, you have to at some point have these conversations. And sorry, Sharon, until like
That's
ramble,
okay.
but to say, present a budget that shows this doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't. It tells us basically, cut your budget ahead of time and then come forward as if everything's okay. That's not the case. Every single department in town should be saying, hey, here's what we need. And that should go to FinCom, and the FinCom should sit down and say, okay, police, you need bulletproof vests, you need ammunition, you need gas to put in your cruisers, et cetera, et cetera. Those things, this is how we rank those in importance. And the schools, you need, whatever, an English teacher, this is where we rank that in importance, et cetera. And then go through and say, okay, what can we afford to have? And how do we rank those priorities? And how do we assess what we have and fit those priorities into places that make sense as a whole, holistically? Not everybody tell me you need 3 to 5% and we'll go with that. And I get it, and I get Mike and James are not probably saying that. What they're trying to say is, hey, 3 to 5% is realistically what we can allocate, because that's basically what we get. So kind of keep your budget in that area. But that's the wrong way to do it. It's simply the wrong way to do your budget. And take it back to your personal finances. You could never run your household that way. Why do we possibly run a town that way?
So let me ask you a question then. So because when each department goes in front of the finance committee, they're doing just that. They're saying what their needs are. And so my question to you was gonna be
They're
so
saying,
what is our finance committee? What are they looking at?
I think they're saying what their needs are within a 3 to 5% range. They're going
Well,
forward
we
and
certainly
saying,
aren't.
and I think we do it right.
Yeah. I
And
don't,
there's not
I
Chris's
think
number,
others,
but-
just from being at other meetings where other town departments have spoken, I definitely think that they are doing what they need. And it just
I don't
all
know.
comes down to
So
this.
I respectfully disagree. I think that maybe they're saying, hey, here's how, what we can do in, within whatever the 3 to 5% range. This is what we can do, but I would be willing to bet over a beer behind at the bar. Some of these department heads would say, yeah, you know what, really could use X or Y, or could use another person on whatever night shift, whatever the case may be.
Mm.
I mean, are they being honest on what they need, or are they telling you what they need in the 3 to 5% range?
Yeah.
I think they're doing the
Yeah.
latter.
I haven't been there for a while since Nick and I were involved in Park and Rec. I know back then, Nick, when we would sit in meetings, I mean, it was definitely people were saying what, for the most part, what they needed, but I don't know.
I think this is where it gets a little tricky from a town standpoint and your personal household standpoint. You have police chief, superintendent, fire chief, the DPW man, whoever it may be. Their job is to advocate and fight, basically, for whatever they think is the best thing for their budget. It's a very hard checks and balances from a FinCom, who's a appointed board, to look at all these and say, wait a second, water department, you don't need that. schools, you don't need that. Oh, fire department, you definitely need that. We're gonna check that off. So it's a very difficult system to just say, hey, here's our money, here's how it's gonna be separated out. I personally, what I think is the 3 to 5%, that's the reality of what we're going to get. And the last thing that I think the town wants, maybe to your point, maybe we are lying to the town, is all these departments coming in and the fire chief, I'm not picking on Sean Simmons by any means, but him saying, hey, I would love to have 4 more guys on the shift. I would love to have, Brian Clark would love to have 4 more officers and 3 more school resource officers. At the same point, like Cherry, to your point, the town has always done this. You have to live within your means. And what are those true needs that we have to have? Have you cut off all the fat out of your budget? Then you get to that table and say, what are your needs? We will fund those needs. Your wants, gonna have to wait. You go on the capital, you do this, you do whatever, as we get free cash into through town. So I think it's a double-edged sword in a way, either way you do it. I think the problem is from our standpoint, not that I'm saying we do it right, wrong, or indifferent. We go and say, hey, we need a 12% increase. The rest of the town's doing, well, we're only doing a 3 or 5%, because that's what our boss, the town manager, and the select board have told us to do. And we look like the bad guys because we're saying we need 12%, and everyone's saying, what the hell? We got told 3 or 5%.
So I think it's really
Can
important.
I just,
Yeah.
I want to just, so I don't disagree with you that it is a somewhat Herculean task.
Yes.
That doing what I'm presenting as the way to do it is at least a start to the conversation. And yeah, I agree with you that the FinCom probably can't sit here and say, yep, this is A and this is B, this is C. But in a perfect world, they would start the conversation. And then at town meeting, we would have a great representation, a lot of people in the town, and we would all sit there and debate and say, do we want, the library to be open 7 days a week or 5 days a week? And what does it cost? And where could we allocate those funds somewhere else, et cetera? That conversation should be had, and we're not having it. And this is not, let me be very clear, this is not to criticize the department heads of other departments. I think that, honestly, I think we have done it this way for so long in this town that they just know to do that. They know that this is what the increase is potentially gonna be. And they say, okay, here's what, level services is. They may not say, and again, I'm just using this example, but, Chief Clark may not say, hey, you know what, at night, we really could use another person. We really should have another person there. There's a little bit of a hole there. So he doesn't say we need another person because it doesn't fit in the 3 to 5% budget. So, and it's not because he's not being, honest or whatever. It's because that's how we've always done it as a town. The town has historically been this, okay, everybody bring in your budgets and have them in a controlled fashion, and we'll have no conversation about what matters and what doesn't matter. And this would not be important at all if we weren't slowly bleeding revenue. If our expenses as a town were not slowly, and I guess maybe even now quickly exceeding our revenue.
Yeah.
We're at the point where we keep talking about the cliff, and our only thought is, well, hey, there's a cliff in front of us, let's just slow the car down, that'll change everything. No. Eventually you go over the cliff. Like you gotta stop the car and think about where you're going here, maybe change your direction. So that's my, and I agree with you that it is a very big task, and it's not something particularly that the FinCom can necessarily sit down and make, perfect calls on, but maybe start the conversation at least. And I'm not trying to call anybody out on the matter. I'm not saying that FinCom's, is doing a bad job. I'm not saying that Chief Clark is not presenting his budget correctly. Hopefully I don't get pulled over on the way home, but, I'm just saying that as a town, why not have a conversation and just say, hey, guys, we clearly have a limited revenue. And that's true, right? The revenue that the town raises is finite. So within that finite revenue, let's have a conversation about what matters most, and should we be shifting things? Should we be saying, okay, our priority is A and not B? That's all I'm saying, but I don't recall ever really having that conversation, quite frankly.
So I
And I've
think
been doing
this
this
is
for
great.
15 years.
I think this is a great thing to bring up at our next meeting, with the joint meeting. I mean, it's a perfect time for everybody to be here.
That was gonna be my point, is when we look at the town budget as a whole, and we are probably 2/3 of the town budget is the schools, give or take, I'm not a math whiz, call it whatever. But a smaller department might not need 3% or 5%. But so to me, the injustice is, like, if everybody presents a level service budget, every department in town, what is that number? Because I would say, level services across the board, that means,
Same as what we're doing right now.
Well, but my question is, you know, if we take a percentage away from some other department, and now we can maybe get 6% or something like that, or whatever that looks like. What's the pain going to be in other departments versus the school department? Because I'm worried what this $2 million potential deficit looks like. You know, because we've already said to keep our schools open, that's fully staffed and everything is a lot more than what we're getting. But, so I guess my question, and we're not gonna rely on retirements, because I don't think we're gonna have a ton of those. We're
This
probably
does
not gonna
include
have.
retirements, yes, it does.
or-
Those who have already put in.
So, I mean, and I think that's another thing for the joint meeting is, you know, does everybody need 3% to keep the lights on? Every department, and what are the, because that's the other problem, is we sit here and talk about our budget, but we never see what the other departments' budgets are. Not that we can't take away from them, but a member of the public could if they want to stand up at town meeting and prove their case, but you know, I think every department's lean, but we see staffing increases in other departments and things like that, but, you know, so do they have staffing needs that need to be met through grants that they're losing, because we clearly are losing grant money, losing staffing because of.
So if I could
And by the way,
address a
we're
couple-
never gonna make up the 2.4.
No.
There's not a chance. I mean, it's
So
a,
if I
this
could
is,
address just a couple things that were discussed. Last year, we got a lot of pushback from the community that we didn't let people know what cuts were going to mean until it was too late. So I think it's really important for us to show now 12.01% is exactly what we have in our schools currently. That is the number. It's not additional staff. There are not other needs being presented in this budget. For example, both Dr. Marcus and Mr. Higgins have said that they could really use a part-time paraprofessional in all of the kindergarten classrooms. Like students are coming in, they're, you know, some of the needs of our students are a little bit different than they were a few years ago. It would be extremely beneficial to have those part-time paraprofessionals there. That is not included in this 12%. Reinstatement of a math and an ELA teacher at the high school was requested this year because class sizes are larger. Those are two positions that were not refilled last year when staff left. That is not included here. So those needs will
And
all
we
be
still
communicated.
Don't have a librarian for this building.
Yes.
And
Yes, and we have
at
one
least
person.
For my 9 years.
Yeah,
Right,
me too,
you know, we have
yeah.
one person doing all of the elementary schools. So it's important to know that there were requests that came forward from the principals and from the department heads that are not shown here. And those will be communicated to all of our shareholders as well. I wanted to make sure that we showed you what this looks like and then also have a conversation about if we're not gonna get 12%. Not right? Let's be honest, like we're all realists in some way, shape or form. So our average over the last 10 years has been 3.7. That has been our average increase. So it's important for us to know, like, what does this mean? And we've sat as, you know, we've met with each of the principals, we've met with the department heads, we've met all as a team. And we'll say, okay, where do we have flexibility? What would we potentially cut? You know, this is going to include, and I'm not using this as a scare tactic, because I know that people will say that that's the goal here. This is the reality. Okay, costs have gone up. Will be a reduction in staff. There'll be changes in programming. We'll be looking at, you know, those things that are extra, like the ho-hos or whatever Dinesh says, like the things that are nice to have in your grocery cart, but not necessarily needed. Like we'll have to look at increasing sports and transportation fees. We'll have to look at the activities that we offer. You know, we have a middle school sports program here that the district is paying for. Like we're going to have to look at some of those things. We'll have to, you know, this is something that we do every year. We move staff out of our budget and into some of our revolving funds, which, you know, that's why we don't have money to pay for the elevator situation, because we're using some of our facilities to pay for staff. We'll be, you know, Dr. Ackerman is not too proud to beg and fills out every opportunity for grants. Like we'll be doing more of that. Mrs. Winsworth, if you could scroll down just a little bit more, thank you. So the next thing that we're going to do, because we've already had a lot of these conversations, we know that 12% is a huge, huge ask. But I think it's really important for people out in the community to know this is nothing extra than what we have right now.
Jen, I wanna just interrupt you for a second.
Please.
And it's, it's semantics, but I think it's important that we're not asking for 12%. And we know we're not gonna get 12%. We're just saying level service is 12%.
Correct.
Understand that. I mean, if every other department in town, their level service falls between 3 and 5%, so be it. Ours does not. And all I'm saying is we should be honest about it. We should not be saying our level service falls between 3 and 5%. It simply doesn't. And there are a number of reasons for that. There are a number of reasons for that, but this education is a wildly different department than the library or DPW or whatever you'll have. Like, it's extremely, I mean, we have by far and away the most employees, which is probably one of the largest contingencies of any department's budget by far.
Mhm.
And we probably have, I would guess, I mean, we probably have 3x number of employees the rest of the town has combined. Maybe probably more, right? I
Can you
low.
give an exact number?
So, I mean, it's a, you know, person intensive business that has a ton of mandates that get thrown out by the state that we have absolutely no control over. And I don't think any other department is in that position. There's no reason not to just say, this is our level service budget. It is what it is. To quote Bill Belichick, you know, may he enjoy endeavors wherever he ends up. But
Yeah.
That's our level service. It's not, we're not asking for 12%. We're saying that's our level service. Now, how do we prioritize things? And if we don't have the conversation, quite frankly, if we don't have the conversation, every year we'll just say, okay, 3 to 5% for the schools, then what we're saying is we de facto prioritize education last. That's basically what we're saying.
Or, I mean, to your point, having the most expenses, the most personnel. You know, I think historically, the schools are not treated as having the most expenses and the most personnel. You know, I mean, that's the reality is, you know, you hold the biggest budget, and I'm sure this is in just about every town in the Commonwealth, that the school departments have the biggest budget, but I would think, you know, 3 to 5% for the smaller departments, that might be more than what level services could be. And we don't know those numbers, and maybe we, you know, when we meet jointly, we can get answers to those questions, but, you know, historically, we're not, you know, deemed to have the biggest budget. We're just, this is everybody's budget. And I'm not saying to take away services from another department, but we know off the bat, we need 12%. Because we've shown it openly and transparently, but we just don't know what the other departments are, you know, what their level services are. Right.
This is gonna sound very bad. People are not gonna like this. My issue with this, we're looking at a $2.5 million deficit from level service.
Mhm.
Back in 2020, we decided to put in $12 million worth of turf fields, knowing the cliff was coming. That was our priority, to put in turf fields. We knew education was going to struggle. Joe told us for years, cliff's coming, cliff's coming, cliff's coming. COVID essentially saved us a little bit. But our priority, as whether we want to say it's a school committee, school admin, town in general, we decided we're gonna put in $12 million fields, knowing $2.5 million was coming, knowing we essentially took cuts last year, knowing next year is gonna be worse than this year. Where are our priorities?
But if we
What
did or
would you
didn't, if
expect
we did or
us to
didn't
do,
do
though?
that, it wouldn't change this number.
Right.
Because that was a exclusion, so.
Correct, but we could have done, you can do an exclusion for everything you want. We could have done a $2.5 million exclusion for the,
Yeah,
for.
we've tried to, we tried to, nobody
No, we
votes.
tried to do
Right.
overrides, we didn't try to exclude, so overrides are
Well,
different.
so,
But you could have done, you
so
could have
that's
said, hey,
that's a very good point, and I'll tell you what the problem is there, and this is another thing I always have a complaint with, is we constantly use one-time money for operational
of
expenses.
course, correct.
So an exclusion works great for a year, and then the next year you have to come back and say, hey, we need that exclusion again. That's an override. You're basically saying you want an override, because what you either want an override or perpetual exclusion. You can't, I mean, it's semantics. It's the same thing.
No, not really, because an override is a lifetime, never go. But
That's actually not true. You can do what's called an underride, but that's
That's
a.
not an override.
But you
No,
don't have
you
to
can do
put
an
up to
underride.
that.
You can actually lower your taxes.
But anyway, like this school is paid for, not obviously at state granting and everything else, but this was a 25-year or 30-year debt exclusion. Everyone got whacked in taxes. It's now, I think, paid off or very, very close to being paid off, and it's done. It's off people's taxes. You know, so there is a major difference there, but what I'm saying is, it's like, I also don't think we've set ourselves up historically, and I'm not blaming anyone here, but I don't think we've set ourselves up to make it so like, hey, we're like, I think we need to get on the same page as far as our priorities, and I think to Sherry's point, getting back into with the select board and the FinCom, and saying why we're doing this, where we're at, you know, is the other town, you know, chiefs and managers and everything else looking at it from a standpoint of like, oh, we're just going up to 3 to 5%, but actually, for us to be level service, we need 10%. You know, I mean, I don't know. We don't know what they're doing, and without really talking to FinCom and the select board and even the town manager to a certain degree, I feel like we're just sitting here looking at numbers saying, this is our level services. What if the police need the level service and there's 25%? You know, and then again, there is only so much money to go around, you know, but at some point, the 3 to 5% is reality, because what is it, 3.74% we've gotten over the last decade?
3.7, yeah.
Which
What
is
did
a
we
good
get,
number.
what did we get last year?
4.12.
Well, so we got a little bit more last year historically than we have over the last decade.
And we historically get more than most other departments. I will say,
Yes.
this is not me saying we don't get, we don't get enough. So, I just want to say really quickly, so you're actually kind of proving my point, or not proving my point, but you're saying what I'm saying, but you're just using a different example. So what happened in that situation was, we said to the town, hey, are you willing to pay extra in taxes for turf fields, a senior center, and a new town hall? And the town had a discussion and said, yep, we sure are. And they were willing to do it. Let's just have the same discussion about a budget in general. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Correct.
So you're saying what I'm saying. You're saying you want to have the same discussion. I don't think that was an issue with our priorities. That was the town telling you, our priority is, yes, we'll pay for a turf field. No, we won't pay for an English teacher. That's what they're telling us.
We've done this a number of
Yeah,
times,
we
and
have.
listen,
Attempts to
I'm on my
organize.
way out, so I'll sit back and I'll let you run with this stuff as much as you want, because we have done this. And we have come together, you know, one of the last 2 override attempts, we had departments say, what are your needs? We had it all spelled out, and people said no. So, I mean, I do take it a little bit personally, Nick, but
Well, I think the override number was considerably less
Yeah.
than the number
yes, it is.
for the 3 projects.
And we kept saying,
By
oh,
a
it was-
factor of like 10, it
Oh,
was
it
like
was-
1/10 of
Right.
that. And they were still like, hell no.
right,
Well, and I think, you know, 2 points to make, speaking of, you know, historically, what would those overrides look like for budgets now? I mean, you're talking, there'd be a lot more money in the budgets because of that.
Of course.
And to your point, I mean, we don't always need to go to that. We could underfund or under, you know, but, and I, you know, when we talk about these other projects that are going on, I would hedge a bet that we don't have increased costs based on our project. You know, whereas operational costs for 2 other buildings are gonna be a lot more than what our
We
fields
actually
are.
have decreased costs,
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah,
right?
but I mean, you know, our project, we can generate a little bit of revenue with rentals. We're not, the other buildings, you know, they're gonna need staffing, they have lighting, they have all these other needs that are going to have to increase their operational costs. And we don't have to theoretically have operating costs increase because we have an option to offset. I mean, I don't think there's gonna be, you know, no one's gonna rent a town hall or pay for space, or maybe in the senior center, there's that option at some point, but, you know, I don't think it's, you know, I want this, not this. I think it's the way things were presented. When we talked about overrides, there was not a united front from everybody. And when we talked about the debt exclusion for, you know, the high school historically, and then these, you know, these 3 building projects, there was a united front from everybody in town. Just about every board was like, we're on board. Everybody was that calculated risk of, do we separate these out? Do we put them in 3 together? And those were made by our town leaders, and they did pass, and we're forever grateful they passed. And I'm sure once the other projects, they'll look good as well. You know, but if we're still circling, you know, the drain with our finances, at some point, we have to take a hard look at what this looks like, and, you know, whether or not we have to lead the charge and say, this is what we have to do, or we continue to have these joint meeting conversations. That's what we're gonna have to do. I mean, we can circle back around, you know, however many times, but this is the reality, and we've shown what the reality is for our department.
and I think to, you know, just to circle back, Nick, I think to say that we have to get our priorities straight, with all due respect to that comment, I think we've had our priorities straight. We've been saying this for a very very long time. And it's, the town has spoken time and time again of what their priority is. So I don't know what more we could have done sitting in these seats. You know, we've been open and honest with what our budget is, even though people think we hide stuff or, you know, lie or whatever. We have been very open and honest with things, and we have said this for a long time. I don't know how, I don't know.
So
Justine?
I guess my last final question on this. When we talk about announcing what this looks like, I know, you know, privately, we've had conversations, you know, I've had them. We announced too late what the cuts were going to be for last year. Like our last meeting of the school year was, what can we do?
Right.
Well, and we all sat and said, we can't really do anything at this point. So I guess my question to you all is, when do we kind of fill in the blanks of what does this reduction in staff look like? What do these fees look like? Like, so I guess, you know, because I don't want to be sitting here our last meeting before town meeting and saying, we still don't know. Or, you know, so I think we need to, if we say the reduction in staff is going to be X positions, the fees have to be raised by X. I think we need to be very aware of what that looks like and get out in front of that early. And, you know, the townspeople can see
I
what this
agree.
is
I
going to
think,
look like.
you know, we've had a lot of conversations as a leadership team about what can we do, what flexibilities do we have. I think right now, we don't have specific things that we're looking at. I mean, realistically, let's be honest, we're looking at 15 plus staff members across the district, and that could be any position, any unit, any role. It's at least, I would say it's at least 15 positions. I mean, I would say that we're, you know, probably looking at some significant cuts at the middle school in terms of extracurricular activities for students, looking at increasing fees, but those are all things that we kind of have to go back and fine tune. Right now, with the next steps, we're looking at class sizes, we're looking at our school schedules. Our school schedules, you know, are we getting the most bang for our buck out of the way we run our day? Like, would a change in schedule allow us to reduce some staffing positions? Christine and I are going through a line by line, like what do we budget versus what are we actually spending? So we're going through all of those pieces and we'll be giving you guys more information, but I think everything has to be laid out earlier for our community so people really know what this means. And we always hear that Norton always saves the day. We've had the ability and the flexibility through COVID funds over these last few years, the ESSER grants, to be able to save the day because we use that money for positions instead of using it for one time. We don't have any more money to save the day.
So with like those ESSER funds, for example. They created some new positions with them. Would those be like one of the first ones on the chopping block since we don't have that money anymore?
Those will be things that we'll have to look at and say, okay, you know, what are the roles that we paid for with these grant funds? What is the impact they're having on day to day? Are those things that need to go, or are there other things that are less important that could potentially go?
This might be a historical.
Yes, prioritizing.
This might be a historical question too, but like, obviously we've got grants for God knows how long. Like, do we have like a historical aspect of like 2013, we got this grant to fund this position, and now we've just incorporated that into the budget? That like, is that another area to look at in terms of like, okay, what grant money did we have? We got lucky, not making this date up and all the time up, but in 2014, we actually easily incorporated that in. We had a teacher retire, we found $50,000 to fund that position, that's what we did. Do we have any historical data that kind of says?
So the last set of grants that would have given us another staffing position were the ARA grants, which were early 2000s. And so okay, this
Gonna be retired by now.
is me going in the way back, like my own historical knowledge. I know at that time we had some positions that were created with that funding. Dr. Yancey was still here at that time. I would have to really go back and kind of check.
I don't-
I'm
we don't need to go back.
99% sure a lot of those were
That's why I said the microfilm.
No, I
Yeah,
think we're
like
good.
24 years
I'm
ago.
thinking
So,
like,
like,
yeah,
my own
5 to 10
historical
years.
perspective,
Yeah.
that was the last set of grants that we would have received. So Title I is a entitlement grant. We receive that every single year. That funding amount kind of ebbs and flows from year to year, and it's actually based off of, our student poverty rates here in town, which we got, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at the spreadsheet today, is actually increased. So we'll probably see a tiny little bit more, funding from that grant next year. But those are staffing positions, those are our reading specialists and interventions that are supporting students. So that's great. We'll take a little bit of that money out of the budget if you do that, but.
So I assume we have the final numbers for what the state budget was, including the cuts that the governor made. Do those affect the schools at all?
So the $375 million worth of cuts, we were told that they will not be impacting state, school and municipal budgets at this time. However, we've also been told that the governor's budget for next year will be significantly reduced because of just less revenue.
Don't worry, we got the millionaire's tax on.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just.
Yeah, you're never gonna see a penny.
There was 600 million earmarked for another program and 3 million cut from the budget, so it's just. Wishy-washy.
frustrating.
So,
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, that's fine, I'll wait. my
I
turn.
saw it in her face.
I know, I
I usually wanted to say something.
I can wait, it's not a big deal. No, I just had two things I wanted to say. One, the budget really was one area that I was nervous about, and as far as just understanding it. And so I appreciate all of the paper and all of the graphs and the line items. And I think from hearing from community members as well, they're also appreciative of it. And like, I think that you are presenting it in a way that people can understand and see where you're coming from. And so I hope that it continues to be received well. But then I also had a question, isn't the town required to spend a certain amount of their budget on the schools, like a certain percentage?
Yes, net school spending. Yes, we are technically meeting that requirement.
Right.
We meet our net school spending requirement as a community. The way that is, this is something that, as you guys know, when we talked about me taking this position, I'm like, I gotta really work on budget. That's something that I really need to kind of figure out exactly how that is determined. It's based on what the town can afford, that ability to pay.
Yeah.
We meet that budget. One of the other documents I'm gonna share with you probably next week is our per pupil expenditures. So looking at what are we spending per student as compared to those like districts that the Department of Education says are comparable to us, even though
They're not.
I mean, they are and they're not at the same time, as well as the TVL, which is our athletic league. Where do we fall in there? And it's also based on the state average. Where is Norton based on the state average? So it's just another piece of information for you to have
Yeah, and net
in your
spending,
back pocket.
net spending to me is very archaic way to look at things anyway. It's saying, one, the state's mandating you to spend this much money. If the schools are doing really well, we're testing great, our kids are going to college, we're doing everything, and we spend $3 million less than they require. What, that has no bearing, it's kind of done at the end of the day. The second thing is every school, including Norton, I believe, spends somewhere between usually 12 to 28% higher than what the net spending amount is. I think last time I looked, we were at like 16 or 17.
I was gonna say, I think we're at 12.
Yeah, so like,
So-
again, like, so it's kind of an arbitrary number, and again, it's just the state making up a random thing based on some random formula that. I don't know, to me, it really doesn't have any real bearing. If you can spend less money and have a well-versed school system in your sending kids out and everything's going well, why does it matter what the dollar amount is?
We're about to spend less money.
Yeah, that's right, well,
We're
yeah.
about to spend less money.
I'll never defend the state, but I will say like the net school spending is not meant to be, here's what it costs to educate our
Correct.
kids. And I used to have a pretty good, a link to a pretty good website that explained everything, including the formula. And the formula is based on a lot of different things. It's based on like your Title I, like all this other stuff. Like there's a bunch that goes into it. So I'll never defend them, but that's kind of where they're at. And you're 100% right. Everybody spends over it. So the idea that we're spending more than that is not somehow like, oh, look, we're doing great. That is not a measurement of doing great, trust me. So the second thing that I was gonna say was, and I'm debating saying this because I'm not sure if it's gonna be, it'll turn the public off, but with respect to getting information out there earlier, I'm I'm not seeing how it matters right now. And the reason I say that is because 2.4 million, we're not gonna pick that up. It doesn't matter if people are furious about the cuts that are coming, or if they're absolutely apathetic. It's whatever, wherever you land on that spectrum, it doesn't matter. Because there's no way for the town to make up that difference. They simply can't. I mean, 2.4 million, I don't know off the top of my head, but police and fire, their budgets are in that area. I mean, and they're the only other town entities, I believe, that are even in even in the ballpark of that. So unless we're saying, hey, we're gonna cut the fire department, police department, there's no way to make that up. So this is not a conversation about like, hey, these are the cuts, so if you care, you should get out there and vote or whatever. That's not the case at all. Like, we can be very clear about the cuts. I mean, last year, we had a long conversation about cuts that were made. People came in afterwards, after the cuts were made, basically, and were like, hey, we didn't know, and whatever. And I believe I said at that meeting, well, that's on you, because we certainly mentioned it. We talked about it, ad nauseum. And nobody showed up at the town meeting and stood up and said, I'm against this, and here's why, because we're gonna cut something to me. It wasn't important until that, that teacher was essentially not here anymore. I mean, I'm not sure that getting the information out there earlier is gonna change anything. And I guess I'm going against my own credo that we should at least start the conversation. We should start the conversation. But just people should be aware, as we get this information out earlier and, more often and more widely dispersed, we really can't change things for this coming year. The budget for this coming year is gonna be between 3% and 5%, and it's gonna be a massive cut. So
Here's my one thing, though. I kind of respectfully disagree. The only reason
I
why.
don't think it's gonna be a massive cut.
Well, no. What I'm saying.
People
though,
are gonna get 6% next
Yeah.
year?
It's donating.
But
I mean, it's really optimistic.
But if our, like, again, everyone thinks we're the ones who set the budget. We pick it and this is what happens and the town rides off into the sunset. It's the taxpayers who pick the budget.
Yep.
They get to decide.
Yeah.
They get to decide where their
Right.
money's going.
Yeah.
All we do is take the information that Jen gives us and says, okay, yes, this makes sense, or hey, could we move money here? Maybe we do have assistance, whatever we need to do. My thing is like, if you can get that out sooner, now town meeting comes around. Someone has it in their hand saying, hey, this is what the schools are looking at cutting. Maybe someone does get up and say, wait a second here. I know the schools are short 2.4 million. I know we're not gonna be able to fund 2.4 million without cutting the water department, whatever. However, we need to find some money. We need to move some stuff around here. We need to put an extra $1 million into the school budget to make sure we don't lay off any teachers and keep bus fees and athletic fees. I feel like if we give them that for town meeting, we've done our job. We said to you,
I agree.
here it
I
comes.
would agree with
You know,
that.
here it comes.
Right.
We're doing what, and we're obviously using, pretty much 95% probably of Jen's recommendations of, hey, this is what we think is gonna cut, this is where we think we're going, this is the direction we're going in. We don't have a choice, we can't find $2.4 million for you. Take it up with the town and your taxpayers can decide on how do you want this budget spent, how do you want it added
And I
to or
agree with that.
subtracted from.
Yeah.
I agree with that. My point was more like, the number is so high that even if we were to move money, you're not gonna come close to this.
No.
And I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking about this, I'm just noticing that we're assuming a 5% increase, which is probably not
Yeah.
likely.
Well,
So-
we're positive thinkers.
So the number, look at Nick is like, "Yeah, we're fine." So the 2.4 million is probably actually low as well.
Okay.
So just be aware of that, but that might be, yes, we should absolutely have, 100% have the conversation. And I don't mean to say that we should go in there and start cutting other departments, but we should have the conversation.
Yeah, I
That's
think-
that's absolutely what I'm saying.
And I
Yeah.
think from a transparency standpoint, from us five sitting up here too, the earlier we get this out, you're gonna have people who wanna come in and talk about whatever they think is important in their schools.
Yes.
And if they're willing to come down here and say, hey, we need to put in, let's use English, because we're probably not gonna cut English out of our budget. I'm really big on English and we wanna keep English in these schools and we think you guys gotta find money from somewhere else or cut somewhere else. At least we can hear from them and then maybe we say, hey, you know what, Jen, maybe we look at doing X, Y, and Z.
We're gonna cut
Right.
math.
What are other areas?
I don't want to say something to you.
Like at town meeting historically, the budget, I can think in my
The fastest
20
one.
years in town.
Yeah.
The budget has changed once on town meeting floor, and that was the year we outsourced
Cafeteria.
Cafeteria.
And we as a committee had to stand up and make that change,
Yeah.
because
That
it was
was-
a change in personnel and healthcare.
Yeah, the
So-
change was minor. We requested the money,
Yeah.
put into our account because we were cutting a bunch
So-
of people. And so there was actually not a tax savings, insurance, whatever the term
So
is.
historically,
Yes,
so at
only
least
time.
if we're getting information out there, maybe someone says, well, if we take 30, 30, and 30, the schools can have another 100,000. I don't know what that number looks like, but historically, we don't get that number out there. Like, we go through, we say, here's our number. And, you know, we're given a number by our town leaders and saying, you gotta stay within this, whether or not that's your means or not, this is a number you're staying in between. And then we go to town meeting and, you know, 75 people show up and warrant article number 16, that's the town budget. Yes, no, and there's no discussion. So at least we're saying, here's your information, do what you will with it. But your floor is at town meeting to make a change if you decide as a taxpayer.
So I just want to leave you guys with one last thought before we move on. These 3 documents that we shared with you tonight as part of like our budget update are public documents now because they have been here at school committee and they're part of our public record. It is my plan to share them with our staff tomorrow and with our families next week, along with a budget survey for our staff and our families to tell us what matters to them. It is something that we stole, for lack of a better word, from colleagues in other districts that have already done this, and we tweaked it to fit Norton. And so we're asking people, like, we're going to show people, like, this is the reality of what we're dealing with here. This is what a level service budget is. These are the realities. What are your priorities for our schools? And then we're gonna use that information to help us in these conversations, as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of
Yeah,
that.
I think that's a great
Brilliant.
idea. Right.
Brilliant.
I think that, you know, what we're doing, starting the conversation early is great. I think that, you know, Nick, I would love to see somebody get up at town meeting, but I think that the process to normal townspeople is so overwhelming and they don't really understand it, that they just sit there silently and hope that the people sitting in these seats are
Hopefully
doing it.
elected.
Right, exactly. I think it's intimidating
Double
to
dog
most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Seriously, Nick's like, that's all you needed to hear.
Yeah.
All right, so should we move on?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Discussion on upcoming school committee meeting dates.
So typically we have our budget workshop in, February-ish. We need to have all of our budget documents, our final, voted recommendation, including the public hearing before that, by March 8th to town hall. So, we had initially looked at February 3rd as our workshop day. But open to see if that works for people.
Or March 3rd.
March 3rd is too late because
Yeah,
we
that's
need
not
to
fair.
have it, I think originally when the calendar was set, it was March 8th, but it's
Oh,
too late
okay.
for us to get it,
Gotcha.
done. So Christine and I are proposing February 3rd.
In the morning,
Yeah, so we would start as early as everyone's willing.
So,
For those of you who are new to the process, it's a rip roaring good time. Vanessa brings munchkins.
I will certainly not this year because I cannot make February 3rd.
Okay.
did we
Which-
do a night last year?
I think we did
might
that.
have- I don't know that we did it last year.
We didn't do it last
I
year.
don't know if we did the workshop
We
last
spread it
year.
out over a few.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't have an actual workshop because essentially we were saying, this is the budget. And we voted on it without, you know, having a ton of discussion, which it sounds like that's where we're kind of at this year. Well, I mean, we know what the numbers look like, we know what the numbers are. I mean,
I mean, the one thing that might be interesting or valuable is to have a conversation about fees and programs and other things that we're going to have to put something forward to the community.
Okay.
But that's up to you.
So I would rather, or I think I would rather go and spend 6 hours on a Saturday and bang through a budget than be talking about it 2 hours at a time over 3 different.
It's
Yeah.
definitely not 6 hours, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, but you know what I'm saying.
we can
So
still
like-
make brunch.
Yeah, I would rather do it on a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, and
Yeah.
if we can, you know, everyone can make it. Whenever we can do it, I would definitely be more inclined.
I mean, we're pretty open. So you guys tell us a date that works and
So if it's a Saturday or a Sunday, your options are basically February
That's super.
for me. Is it
At
really?
Super Bowl?
Sunday the 11th.
Yeah, it
Alright,
is.
so-
Yeah.
That's up.
Well, we
Well, if
can
you
do
do
it
it-
we can do it early.
If you do it
Dry
early,
January's over and we're up.
we could do
We can
nine
do it.
AM.
So
Right,
I will say this, and I think I've said this, so I think I said this past, I think I said when we were talking about originally. I don't think it is crucial that I am there for that.
Okay,
I feel like I can get up to speed on the budget pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Particularly if it is going to be more of a presentation and less of a discussion. With respect to discussion of fees and increasing
Yeah.
fees, et cetera, I think that that is a discussion we should have after we know where we're at.
Okay.
Not as part of the budget itself. Speaking for myself, my appetite to do that is very low. However, we are probably going to be in desperate times here very soon. So we may have to consider that, unfortunately. And I know Sherry, I know at least you and I, and probably Dan, Justine and Nick, I don't know your opinions on this, but we've historically kind of been against doing that, but we may have to do that. I think it behooves us to wait until we actually know where we stand. before we-
But I think my counterpoint to that minimalist one is if we're looking at the budget and setting up with the budget, we would need to at least have a discussion on if we raise the fee to X, we would raise this amount of money in the budget. So while the budget, so for example, if we raise the fee to $300, that adds X to the budget, which would then have to be part of that budget
Right,
discussion.
so
that day.
if we're doing that, then what you're saying is we are raising fees prior to submitting our budget, because that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna
I
raise
think we would
fees.
say we're raising fees to see what we can make up of $2.4 million.
Well, we know what we can, generally know what we can make up, right? Like, if we can extrapolate. Whatever.
we have that information already.
Yeah, you know the information, so it's just a question of, do we want to go forward and say, our level service budget is this, or do we want to say, our level service budget is this minus whatever we think we can raise in fees? So I guess you're essentially saying, because if you submit that budget, then you de facto had your vote on that. So I think makes more sense, unless we really are like all in on raising fees. If we're all in on raising fees, then, if that's a fait accompli, then so be it, but I don't want to necessarily get to that until.
Would it be valuable for us to bring you some information at another meeting to share, an increase from X to Y? This would bring in this as an estimated revenue?
Well,
I don't want to,
I think it's one of those things where if we're talking about a 2.4, whatever, I don't have that, I turned it away because I was disgusted by it. If we're looking at fees to raise X, I don't know that. So I guess what would the timeline be on that? If our budget's going to be this with the money we get from the town, then I would think raising fees would be our way to say we're trying to gain more from that 2.4. So we may not have to have that discussion, because if we raise fees, that's not really going to the budget we're going to get from the town. That would be our own internal budget, because that would go into
you'd
revolving.
be raising
accounts,
fees
not-
instead of cutting a teacher.
But that's like I said, that's more our internal process budget than, because the town's gonna,
It wouldn't matter because the money's fungible, so I think every sport,
You
loses
lose
money.
some.
But it's true though, because every sport loses money. I think almost every
Yes.
sport loses money. So if we raise fees, we're just basically, we're taking those fees and we're paying, we're using them to pay for the sports. And then that money comes out of there and goes to pay for the teacher. So it doesn't matter how we do it. It doesn't matter how we account for it. It's net, it's gonna be the same. So we're either saying our budget is X or it's X minus the fees. That's where we're at. But, and I get it. I'm at the point where I realize we're probably gonna have to do the fees. I understand that. So if,
I guess we start with numbers and go from there.
Yeah.
We'll just tread lightly.
do you guys have a sense of if we raise fees, are we talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions?
Almost
Tens
certain.
of thousands.
Yeah, so it's it's,
Right.
It would be
Nothing.
like,
Right,
you're
exactly.
changing a teacher for fees,
Right.
okay,
a newbie teacher.
yeah, I don't,
And one way or
It's-
another,
I
you're
guess
still
I'm
teaching the parents department, like,
yeah.
Well, that's 100% what's gonna happen, right? Because boosters and parent organizations have to start fundraising more, and guess who's gonna pay for that? Yeah.
And as we've talked about
Yes,
a million times
Yeah.
in terms of its parent tax.
All right, so should we look at February 11th then in the morning? Did that work for everybody?
It's a Sunday.
Yes.
Oh, wait,
That seems enough.
No, okay. You're not here?
Sorry.
Can we do it at night? Can we do it Wednesday night?
We can do a week, right?
I don't know.
How about the 14th?
I know.
I have no plans.
I got that right.
You bet, Mr. Rogan. He's a wonderful guy. I would never say that.
You're live.
Yeah, we,
I know he's not watching that, it's fine.
Could we do it like the 6th, Tuesday the 6th?
Could we, I can make it work if everybody can do that. A Wednesday would be better.
See, I can't do Wednesdays because
Okay.
Josh has games on
I can-
Wednesdays.
Tuesday will work, as long as I have a little bit of that.
Bring your little ones.
Then that's pretty much good.
If I join us, you can
that's a night, I won't bring much, it's,
Okay.
I'll bring martinis.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
six works.
What time? 6?
February sixth, that was saying,
Yeah.
Tuesday. Perfect, that's good.
What,
Yeah.
what was the time, 6?
We'll do 6 o'clock.
should we just have it in central or have it here?
We usually do it in central.
We'll do it at Central.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll order some pizza or something.
That
Yeah.
sounds great.
We'll all chip
We'll
in.
have to chip in.
Yeah, we have to
On the
pay for it
budget.
ourselves.
Yeah.
District can't afford it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where we going this budgeting meeting, basically?
Yeah.
Budget workshop. I'll send it all to you. I'll send an invite to all of you.
Perfect.
Well, I mean, so I wonder if location wise, we maybe just say the Yale Library in case we happen to get a crowd.
Sure.
I'll good call.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
Because I know we can't change it once. it's
Yeah, it has to be a
posted,
public meeting, yeah.
All right,
You
so
never
Yale
know.
Library.
Been doing this 15 years, I get to see one person.
I know, I know,
I
right?
think one year we had like 1 or 2.
Really?
No,
Might have.
one, we had 3 people, but they were trying to earn their licensure for principalship.
Oh, you might be right.
And
They were
that was
like,
the only reason they
they're
were
the
there.
one-
Other than that,
Yeah.
nobody had shown.
You're in the wrong room. Halfway through, they're like, wait, this isn't Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, first reading of surplus items policy.
All right, this is coming to you but by request. This is a policy that will take a look at any items that we have that are left over. It really follows the statutory requirements that are put forth. So this is a first read tonight. And any comments or concerns or things you would like to adjust can be done.
I had 2 thoughts when I read it. The first is, it talks about disposal of things that are estimated at certain values, X, Y, Z, whatever, 10,000, under 10,000. And as I'm looking through it, if something is estimated at under 10,000, but it actually starts, the bidding starts coming through at over 10,000. Do we need to then change the way that we're doing it? Because our estimation of the valuation is not correct. That's my first question.
All right, is the
Does that
question,
make sense?
is the question?
Okay, I have this gavel right here, and I think this thing is not worth, it's worth $5,000 because
Is
Sherry's.
your
used
question
it,
on who judges the value?
And it's, nope, that's another question. That you go to my second one.
Okay.
So I think that's worth $5,000.
Yeah.
And I go through the disposal of items under $10,000 process. And the first person that comes in and says, I'll pay you $20,000 for it. Sherry used that gavel, that's $20,000 a minute. I think it's gonna be historically valuable. Do I now say, well, hold on, I'm using the wrong process? I should be using the process of those things that are estimated over $10,000, because my estimation of valuation is incorrect. This is
I don't know.
This is just this first reading, so it's just food
Yeah,
for thought.
All right, food for thought.
So, and my second thought was, and this is kind of akin to what you said, and the whole discussion of this originally, this doesn't actually answer the original question that we had. So the problem is there's no valuation clause.
Yeah.
It just says, okay, this is valued at this is valued at that, this is valued at that, and this is valued at, worthless. I think, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but the original reason that you wanted to do this was because how are we determining the value is 0? In this case, there was a discussion of, we thought something was worth 0, and Nick said, well, we don't know that it was worth 0. So there should be some clause in there about, you know, whatever. A prudent person or, best faith efforts to determine value lead you to believe it's at, you know.
Yeah.
At a value of 0, because without that, it doesn't really solve the problem, and I think you were originally.
So it talks about the director of financial review, the written recommendation, make a final determination of its merit. So
So do we?
And that's exactly what you did
Right?
before, but,
there was,
But-
we deemed it as not valuable
right,
versus, yeah,
but to Nick's point, we
Yep.
didn't know, and I think that was kind of to codify, how do we determine that it has 0 value? Am I wrong? Am I, because if I'm wrong, then this is great and pass it, but if I'm
No,
not
yeah,
wrong, I think
yeah,
that's,
You're on the right. track.
right, you were trying to say like, hey,
How do we, yeah,
we just
Right.
said, okay.
how do we
it's
determine
0.
it?
Right.
So there should be something in there, even if it's, it probably has to be somewhat, there has to be some vagary to it, because if it's super specific, it would almost be impossible to prove. But there should be something in there about the valuation of something at 0, like how, you know,
All right,
what is the basis of valuation? It can't just be so-and-so says it's worth nothing. Because that doesn't
Because
solve for.
you'll find a so-and-so that says it's worth something.
Right, exactly.
Because that's the thing, is like, if it's a surplus vehicle, well, you know, that might be worth it for a company to retrofit. So I mean, that's where you get into this, we might say it's worth 5,000 because we don't need it, but to someone else,
Right.
oh, I'll give you 5,000 for that, but then I'm gonna.
If you leave it on eBay long enough, someone will pay something. Like, that's just the reality. So there should be something akin to that.
okay,
And those moments.
I think typically when it comes to like auction surplus, say with a vehicle, for example, it's like, you know, based on comps that you do.
Yeah.
That vehicle will be worth less than 10,000. It doesn't run. One we did, it was one for like different things. So then when you go to put it on public auction, if you're right, the value did come up over 10, which it wouldn't, but it did, then yes,
Nowadays
you
it
take
might.
it back and probably reassess.
And a car is probably a lot easier to value.
right.
Yes,
Then-
and say,
And so bringing us back to like the original issue was, we need to have some codified way to say, okay, this is why we value this at 0 or whatever. And that's what I'm getting at. And
All right.
it doesn't have to be solved tonight. I'm just,
Is it a way though, like when you brought up getting 3 quotes for something, is it getting 3 estimates or, you
It
know,
could be.
make something like
It
that,
could be.
you know, like,
that's, yeah.
instead of just having
Yeah.
one person's opinion,
absolutely,
have,
yeah.
you know,
And,
maybe
you
3,
know-
that's our number.
Typically, for other things that we have to get rid of, it's much easier to make that determination. So like, one of the big things that often comes up is old curriculum, old textbooks, right? So you have a textbook from 1998, it's world geography. Like, let's talk about how much that has changed since 1998. And you go online, there is a resource that you can use to see what the value is. You can see if other districts are using it. It's very easy to determine that there is no value there. So that's an easier process than some other things that have come up. So, why are you laughing at?
98 was a good year for World.
It was.
I was actually thinking about an episode of Modern Family
Oh.
where they had these like old magazines, and they were so out of date that they were like borderline offensive. And I was just,
You know, I have to say, before we had our
When you said
elementary
old
library,
textbooks,
there
I
were
was
some
like-
books like that in
I
our
was like, you
library.
wonder like, what are these old
Sure.
textbooks saying, you know?
Yes, yes.
Don't go too far here, it can fall off the edge.
I'm assuming did we run this by legal yet?
Yes.
And I'm assuming this isn't all of our writing, we probably just
Oh, gosh, no.
districts and everything else.
As we said, recreated the wheel in different places.
I guess my initial thoughts when I first sat down and read it was like, this is a lot.
Mhm.
Like it's kind of not where I was kind of going with it in a way. I'm okay with it being laid out this way. I don't have an issue with it. It's pretty self-explanatory, if you will. But I think to Dinez's point, like, there's just a few things on here that I'm like, well, who is that for us? So like, chief procurement officer, who makes,
Christine.
yeah, but who makes that final determination? And again, maybe to the sheriff's point, is it, if we're unsure of something, we shouldn't just get rid of it. We know if textbooks are old and we run them through the system and it's, we're getting nothing for these things and it's gonna cost us more money to ship them somewhere than we're gonna make, how could we throw them
And
away?
no one wants to come and pick them up.
Exactly. So like, I guess to my point is like, where I think you just need a little bit more in terms of like, who makes the final call? And then ultimately. What is like DPW? Like, what is there? You must have something. What does the fire department do? Have you looked at anything else in town? Because I think it would also be viable for everybody to kind of have something similar to other departments in town that like, hey, this is what the school's following, this is what fire department follows, and it kind of matches. And again, we're gonna have different things, obviously, than a fire
For the
truck,
process.
you know, but the process should be generally marked
So
together to kind of make it easier.
I
for
don't
everybody.
think individual departments handle their surplus. So the surplus program goes through the select board. It's declared as surplus. Then I assume it either goes to the town accountant or the
Correct.
town manager.
Mhm.
So like Chief Clark's not saying I have these 50 radios that are surplus. So I mean, it's probably either the town manager or the treasurer that goes through that, municipal.
Correct, but then it
surplus.
goes to the select.
Yes,
All they do is declare it
So
surplus.
technically speaking, though, where the governing body, if you
yes.
will, should it also come to us to sign off on that piece of paper, just like the select board does for all the surplus materials?
Probably not, because they're the ones that make all the financial decisions in the town. We make them for the schools,
But
but it's
that's-
still town property.
Yeah, but you don't have,
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy to do that. I think there's some merit to have it come before us, if it's considered surplus.
So it does talk about
if
the
we're saying it's
governmental
worth-
body,
I actually think.
like
that
that
there's
would be
some
you.
merit.
Yeah.
That is the school committee.
correct.
The. I think. You wanna do that when there's money involved, right?
Of
When,
course,
when there's a determined value. I think when there's not a determined value, it may be valuable for us to put a memo together and say, we're getting rid of these 1998 world geography books. Through this process, we've determined that there's no value, and just. Perhaps that way, because otherwise I would say.
Well, actually,
Here's the
think
thing though,
opposite.
if
You
there
think the
isn't
opposite's
money
happening?
attached to it, we're not getting that money.
I
Not
think the
gonna
Right,
opposite.
you don't care,
Why
No,
would
because it's
why-
gonna go to the town.
Why?
It's not gonna come to us.
it goes back to the general. back to the
Goes
general
back
fund.
into our general fund.
Yes.
Just like Medicaid.
Yep, I actually think the opposite, and the reason is because the process for things of assumed value has some check and balance to it.
Mhm.
So,
Oh, so for zero.
if there's zero value, and that's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like in the ethics, so if there's zero value, if the next person after Christine, so I don't want to talk Christine, the next person after Christine is really shifty and says, hey, that new snow blower we just bought is worth nothing, it's surplus, and I'm gonna, get rid of it, I'm gonna give it to my cousin who, needs a snow blower, and so then it's like, oh, okay, so the shipping happened, that should come before us first, so we can say, wait a minute, that snow blower has a value of $550, and
Totally agree.
so,
And unfortunately, I think it's going to create more work for us. I'm gonna have to sign off on stupid.
It
things.
is, it is.
But I also think, in the world of checks and balances, and again, I don't want to pick on Christine, but if Christine says, hey, that pile of dirt was worth nothing, then Christine has, 15 yards of lumen in her driveway. Well, that's what I'm saying, but like, so, yeah. So like, and again, like that's, and then obviously, we don't expect people to do that, we don't want people to do that naturally, but like,
But it is
that
our
is our job. Our job is to make sure that that's
It
not
doesn't
happening,
happen.
because it does happen all the time,
All right, so we will, make some tweaks to this and, bring it back to you guys for, 25th.
Okay, thank you. All right, review and vote on changes to the 24-25 school calendar.
So this was actually voted on last year, which is, great, March 23rd of 2023. What we've done since then is we added the exam dates for the high school and just, the, professional development early releases as well. So this is a complete calendar for you for the 24-25 school year.
And we don't foresee this changing.
Nope, the one thing that we did do is we have the election day is a no school day in
Right.
November. So that avoids that issue.
Okay,
That's the presidential.
That's the
Correct.
presidential
Yeah.
election, yes.
okay. Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve the 24-25 calendar?
so.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor? Aye. Oh, yeah, sorry, superintendent goals.
All right, so when I presented these goals to you all at the beginning of the year, we talked about that, the fact that I would come back, at the midpoint of the year and share an update with you, which I have. And I'll kind of go through them in a little bit more detail for public. We also talked about the fact that the committee wanted to do the, evaluation at the end of the year prior to the springtime election. So what we'll do is, I'll probably share that with Sherry, probably mid-March. That way we can do that and do that publicly before, the election as well. So that's still,
Yeah, I think
What
that
the
was the
group would
biggest
like to
thing is
do.
historically, if we have a new member,
yeah. it
we're
makes it-
talking about it and they're like, what is all this? I didn't
Yeah.
fill it
Yeah.
out. Or I remember, I think my first year, I didn't even fill it. I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about.
No,
Yeah.
that's,
Right.
And
Yeah.
So I think to get it done before the election is a good idea.
So I'm just giving you a super quick update on the goals and how they're going so far. The first goal was all around the effective entry and direction setting, which is the superintendent's entry plan. So the initial entry plan was presented to school committee on September 14th and included an overview of the entry process, the areas of focus and how information would be collected and analyzed. Since July 1st, I have engaged in a series of interviews with community leaders, staff and administrators of Norton Public Schools, attended parent, board, and CPAC meetings, met with student groups, conducted surveys with students, staff, and families, and completed residency days at all schools. The data collected from these interactions has been an integral component of the entry process. In addition to reports from these interviews, data such as local assessments, enrollment trends, special education reports, historical budget documents, as well as student data by subgroup demographic. Together, this information is creating a picture of Norton Public Schools, the strengths of our schools and the areas that we need to focus on in order to move forward as a school community. And I'll be presenting my full report of entry findings to you on March 14th. If that date is not good, I can tweak it, just let me know. The second goal was focusing on maintaining momentum during the transition. And it talked about the way that I'd be working with our principals and other administrators, making sure that teaching and learning is our focus. By October 15th, all principals and central office administrators completed their self-assessment and goal setting requirements of their evaluation plan. I met individually with each of the administrators and we talked about specific goals. Every single administrator has a goal around IMTSS because that is our primary area of focus for this year, for all buildings and departments. And they also have their own individual professional practice goals that made the most sense for themselves and where they are. This year, 4 of our administrators are currently on 1-year evaluation plans due to their tenure in the district. But in the first 3 years in a new district, they are required, or in a new role, it's required to be a 1-year plan. So those administrators have been notified that their mid-cycle is to be completed by February 1st, and those will all be done. School visits have been the most important aspect of my first year. As we all know, things happen day to day and you don't always get to where you want to go. But I have been doing bi-monthly walkthroughs for every other month. I know that's- we talked about once before. I got stay trapped.
That was actually biannual.
Yes, I remember that, yes. So I
That was like 5 years ago.
It's crazy.
steel trap.
She was ready for that to come up.
I actually went and like Googled bi-weekly versus bi-weekly to see which one it was. And so those have been really, really great. The school residencies were so much fun. And then the principals and I do walkthroughs together at least once every other month. And that's in addition just to my, visits and pop-ins, things like that. And then finally was my new superintendent induction program. Since July 1st, we've had 6 of our meetings. They're either in person or virtual. It's really great to have other superintendents that are in the same position to talk to and say, am I crazy? Like, what's going on in your district? So it's been really, really great. Huh? Like, yes.
That's a quick conversation. Yes.
So, and then I meet with Dr. Wong on a regular basis, once every other week. We do a virtual call for an hour and then we text, and she is actually coming to our leadership meeting next week as well. So to give you some feedback. So I'm happy to provide you with any evidence of any of these things or additional information. And this is also an opportunity for you to provide any feedback. We can do that tonight, or we can do that at the next meeting if you'd like. Just because of, my evaluation process is very public.
I mean, I think maybe just some more. So, seeing like what you're seeing on your walks, maybe some more, like. we need
Sharing
to-
that
We need to
information.
really look at, the flooring at the school because I tripped out, it's something like a little more substance to what you're seeing. I think it's just going
You got it.
a little more substance.
Of
into,
course,
If,
what the visits are
if the
like.
problems you're seeing are, something that we need to address as well. Or if there's no
Absolutely.
problems, even better.
I do think, one of the positives, like Justine mentioned, some of your reporting, I think the two of you together, if you've made it, because I think more like you. So it's easier to see and understand, and I think in turn is helpful to the public, to kind of understand things as well, so. I've liked what you guys have done there. So thank you for that, yeah. Okay.
Right, two things. One's a question, one's a statement. I'll start with the statement. I think you guys have done an awesome job coming in. Obviously, I think one in a brand new role, bringing someone from a different district coming in. You're still fairly new. I mean, I think the team in general has been very transparent with us. I think to Justin and Sherry's point too, like getting all the data, seeing stuff has been way better. I don't even want to say really communication because we communicated well before, but I feel like everything's laid out a lot easier. Just in general, from whether it's graphs to budgeting to, just easy to read, easy to see. I think that's the kind of the statement. And my question is to you, Jen, what's been, what are we in 6, 7 months now or whatever? What's been your greatest story so far? And then what is an area that you think that you kind of got caught off guard by and what we can improve on?
This moment right now.
So I've said since like the second week of September that I'm gonna write a book. And because there's just certain things that come up day to day that you just can't make up.
Yep.
So I think one of the best things for me has just been the positive interactions with students and families, because in my teaching and learning role, I had a lot of interactions with students and teachers, but not as much with families. And there are times where a family will reach out and say, this is the challenge that we're having, and just be really honest and vulnerable with you. And it's a great opportunity for us to make connections, to get to know families on a really different level. I've said it 1,000 times, like the residency days were the most fun days I had. I really love to do them every single year, just because it gives you a great opportunity to engage with students. I have an awesome superintendent advisory council. They come and they eat pizza with me every other month, and we talk about just things that are going on in their schools, and I'll bring them a couple topics and they'll bring me a couple topics. And it's just been really, really great to see teaching and learning from a different lens. I think the thing that has probably surprised me the most, but really not surprised me, is some of the day-to-day weeds that we get stuck in. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with me, and it's really important that whatever the situation is, I'm giving it my attention. And so, there might be times where I had a plan to do something and I'm not getting there because this issue that came up, took more time than I thought it would. But it's, I think being a new superintendent is a really difficult job, but I can't imagine doing it in a place where you didn't know people and you didn't have those established relationships. Like, that's been the saving grace, is knowing the people and the players. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Anything else? No, all right. We've waited all night for this one.
I know.
He's gonna be so quick. He's gonna be so quick.
You jinxed this because you said this was gonna be a quick meeting.
No, I was
Sarcasm.
No, I was like,
Being optimistic.
I was willing it.
Once that
I was like,
budget
all
goes
right.
there,
I wasn't at the last 2 meetings, she forgot.
Yeah, exactly.
She forgot.
I was hoping.
All right, you're
Very
up.
quick
I'm
on
up.
this.
So I just,
So is
wanna-
Brian.
I just want to say, I really appreciate the back and forth. The conversation that we had a couple of months ago was terrific. So kind of as an outgrowth to that, I know there was a request to dive into deeply into the MCAS data. So I'm just going to go through some slides in terms of setting the background, the texture, the format. When we get to the individual data slides themselves, I'll keep them posted for folks to see, but won't keep them up there for too long, just so that we can be intentional and purposeful and mindful of it this time.
So if,
Can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Before we start, we already went through a lot of MCAS data
Yes.
in a previous meeting. So if this seems like we're flying through this on the public side of things, that's why you can go back and watch that meeting and then maybe catch up and watch this out.
and I would say to anybody as well who's.
Next to seven.
Who's watching at home, I would create a space if somebody wanted to take some time and unpack it with me. I love to do this work. It actually gets me excited. I know it sounds strange, but to be able to really go to root cause and to look at things is actually very valuable for me. So it makes me really happy to do it. In terms of the data, if we could go to the next slide, please. It's grades 3 through 8, it's ELA and math. And part of the ask from our last meeting was some comparison to DART districts, and those are listed right below. Next slide, please. If we go to what DART is, it's just simply, it's a district accountability and review tool. So it takes districts that have similar demographics, socioeconomic status, high need students that are comparable to Norton. It's not a geographical representation. So I know that some of the towns you saw, they're like, well, Sandwich is on the Cape. Indeed it is, but demographically, they share some profile information with us. And it just helps us identify information over time. Next slide, please. And again, I have referred to that for folks that want to dive in more. Norton has a DESI DART page, which has a high number of informational pieces there. Next slide, please. DART's value, we know it's not perfect, but there are enough numerical and geographical pieces to give us a basis of comparison. So I'll then move into like the history of where we are. So we know that in 93, state testing was adopted as part of the Mass Educational Reform Act, and that publicly available data goes back to 1998. So really the first generation was referred to as the legacy scale. And there were 4 scoring categories: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and failing. That was the first iteration of MCAS. That shifted in 2017, and those scores are often referred to as next generation. So the categories, as you'll see up there, are a little bit different. If we wanted to continue to build some context for the next slide, please. You're going to notice in some of the data that you're going to notice a downward trend from when there was a transition from the legacy to the next. And so that means the number of exceeding and meeting students in each category has dropped in schools, grades, and across the state. And then next slide, please. Some additional context, because again, there's been a number of different events. We had no MCAS in 2020, a partial in 2021. There are some districts for which longitudinal data is not available for every year, so you'll notice a couple of blanks in the charts. I think it's important to understand that MCAS is important, but it really is only one data point and is not a sum total of who we are as a district. We use it because it's a basis of comparison between students here in Norton and every other district in the state. So it's kind of a starting point to look at that information. So we'll start by just looking at some more additional context. We could go from paper to computer-based testing. Norton gradually transitioned, and we went fully digital in 2018. And so this is the data for grade 3 ELA. And in all the slides that follow, we're going to look at trend lines. You can see very clearly on the graph where Norton is. Norton is the dark purple, the state is red, and then our DART districts are in those other colors. So I'll give you a chance to look at that if you haven't already. Next slide, please. And again, similarly, grade 3 math, it's Norton dark purple, the state in red, and additionally other districts. Just a couple of big picture things to look at as we go through the remainder of the slides. So you'll notice that you're going to see generally somewhat of a downward universal trend from about 2015 on. Part of that was the reflection in the increased rigor of the test. You're going to see as well that that coincides largely with the state average. When we get to the high school slides, we're going to see that the end product is actually
good. The high school at the end, does well, both in a numerical sense, but also across against the state average. So the product that we have here in Norton Public Schools is a good one. And then the third piece is that you'll also see from 2020 to 2023, because of interrupted learning, you're gonna see the scores hit a bit of a battle. I'm sorry, I did that a little bit out of order. I should have done that before the slide, but just something to look at as we go through.
So can I ask one question?
Yes,
When we look at these dark districts, do we know what the criteria is that matches us with these districts?
we do. So one is enrollment. Another is demographics. So for instance, number of students that have free and reduced lunch, number of students that have similar special education surveys, other financial indicators as well. Those are kind of the big picture ones, which is why it doesn't always align geographically.
Yeah. I
Or
was-
financially, right? Like you see like a place like Foxborough.
Yeah,
Who
that's
we
the
know.
first one that came to mind.
Right,
'cause
and
that's-
it's so interesting because you look at so Foxborough is yellow. And
Yeah.
Foxborough is almost consistently at the top of these charts in every single grade level, every single subject area. But at the state level, they take Norton and they take Foxborough and they compare the two districts. You know, so it comes down to special education percentages, free and reduced lunch, educator proficiency, all of those things.
So I know we used to have, what was it, the website, we used to have it on our website, I forget what the name was, but you could go and.
Yeah, ClearGov, yep.
And none of these were on there back then, that was only 3 or 4 years ago. I remember it was like East Bridgewater, Groton, Dunstable.
Yep, so East Bridgewater is still, one of the. I think EB is still on there, Ashburnham, Westminster, Bellingham is considered a like district for us. I have a few others here that I was doing this per pupil. Stoneham, Amesbury, East Longmeadow.
So I would suggest that we don't get caught in the weeds of individual towns.
Mhm.
Because I'm not sure that there's really a ton of value to be added there for this exact reason. You know, if you look at us and say, okay, how do we trend versus, versus the data set? You don't want another small data set. You want the largest data set you can have, and that's the state. So, for what it's worth, I'm not trying to cut you off at the knees, but I don't know if I would go through slide by slide of us versus the state versus all the cohort, the dark cohorts. I think us versus the state is really where you're going to see the information that I was looking for personally. So it's just a thought, because I don't know that looking at this many lines going up and down and back and forth is showing us anything.
And perhaps, we could certainly make available the supplemental packet that I shared as well.
Do you have the ones with just the state?
So they're not actually in the slide deck. That was a supplemental packet,
All right,
which was shared, but what I can do, we can certainly make that available.
so the reason I'm asking is because I wasn't here for that good discussion on public meeting, the Zoom stuff. We're on Zoom right now.
We are,
So can we discuss the ones that
absolutely,
that's in the state without being shown?
yes, because
Okay.
because they can still see the same
Yeah,
information
that's true. I
that's
guess they
there,
are there,
right? The
yeah,
only
yeah.
thing that
Right.
was done was the other
We
ones
just
were
cut the
taken
notes.
out.
So if we could, next slide, please. We could move to grade 4 ELA, and again, I'll just leave it up there for a second if anybody has any questions, and help the folks at home to kind of focus on, if you're looking at simply Norton and the state is in red and the Norton is in purple. And if you have specific questions, please feel free to stop. I'll be happy to answer them. Next slide, please. Again, that does definitely show the trend with Foxborough.
You might not know why this happened, but it did seem to me like ELA, once you got to the new legacy test, or the old one, whatever, at 17,
Yes.
we kind of went like, but like
Yes.
with math, we kind of stayed similar.
Yeah.
Do we have any like clue on why that happened? Just did the test get that much harder in English, but not in, or ELA, but not in math?
So the questions are totally different.
Yes.
So the legacy MCAS for ELA specifically was always multiple choice. So you would read a passage and then you would do a multiple choice answer. The way that it works now is it's students sometimes will have to compare two texts, so they'll have an article about a topic and then they'll have a fiction, like say it's about the Dust Bowl, right, hypothetically. They'll have two different things and then they'll have to compare and contrast the different types of reading. There is a lot of highlighting in the passages and pulling out details. It'll be where you have, 5 different sentences and then you have to kind of put them in order or, talk about the character. It's very, very different where as much as we all talk about how math has changed, math's math, right? There was always a component of multiple choice questions with the assessment, and there was also a component of students had to do their math, show their work, and write the answer. So that part didn't change as much. But I also think, for those of us who have done this for a long time, like you can see in grade 4 math, in grade 4 ELA, that grade 4 has always been a challenge for us. You can see how that, math kind of plateaued and was below the state average as well.
All right, so I'll stop you right there, because this is the only thing I wanted to talk about. When I look at these charts, and I'm now looking at the charts without any of the dark cohorts, I'm just looking at the state and the town of Norton. And the reason I'm looking at just that is because the state tells me on a grander scale, was the test harder, easier, et cetera? It should be a relative comparison for us to determine, to take out the variable of how hard the test was given. So how do we do against the state is really kind of what we want to look at. I look at grade 3 ELA and math, and we kind of hover right around the state. We, a couple times they're a little bit ahead of us, a couple times we're a little bit ahead of them. I look at grade 5, we're generally ahead of them. In 2023 ELA, they beat us there, but generally we're better than them. Grade 5 math, same thing. Grade 6, same thing. Grade 6 math, same thing. 7 ELA, 7 math, same thing. Math, a little bit of a hiccup, 2021, 2022, but generally kind of track with them. 8 ELA, 8 math, same thing, we track with them. 10 math, 10 ELA, we're actually a little bit better than them generally, which takes us back to grade 4. Grade 4 ELA, we fairly consistently are behind them. And grade 4 math, we almost exclusively are behind. And it's not anymore a small number. It seems to be a fairly decent difference between where we are and where they are. Roughly 10 points in most cases, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. So we have this conversation all the time. We talk about that it's a transition school, and I don't care. We got to figure that out.
And I think,
So, and here's the thing, and Brian, for the background, we consistently see this, and this is why I wanted to see historically how it looked. Consistently, we are well below the state in that grade, particularly in that subject. So we got to figure that out.
and I think we've already begun some really great work to help figure that out. So this year, we're onboarding new instructional materials for math, stepping stones. In fact, the PD provider was in district today. And so for the last 2 days, myself and Christy Dietz, along with the building principals, went to every classroom in grades K through 5 in the district. And we did what we would call walkthroughs. They were non-evaluative observations. They were meant to look at how the materials were being utilized. They were meant to look at the instructional routines. They were meant to look at the acquisition of knowledge that kids were having. Because I think one of the things that we've needed are curriculum upgrades. And we've known, and I know historically, and Jen and I and the leaders have had conversations about the need for that really current evidence-based math materials to support our curriculum. So we've had a laser-like focus on this for the past couple of years. And I know, and I'm very confident that this year and beyond, with these new materials, coupled with our IMTSS structures, are gonna make a big difference in these schools.
So when can we see those results? When are we going to see those MCAS scores back to what they should be?
I think we will start to see progress as early as this year. Oftentimes, with new curriculum adoption, assessment scores are a lagging indicator. But based upon our mid-year checkpoint, in terms of scope and sequence, in terms of the style of instruction, in terms of the pacing, our consultant said today, you are at or above where you're supposed to be. In seeing those classrooms as part of our work, the teachers are doing a great job.
And I'm glad that we're looking at K through 5 and thinking holistically, but at the same time, K through 3 and 5 don't seem to be having a problem. So, I'm not pointing a finger, I'm showing the data, and the data is telling me something really specific here.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because when you think about the 10 years of data, there have been so many factors that have changed over time. You've had staff retire and new staff come in. Tests have changed, the dynamics have changed. Programs have changed. There have been so many different factors that have gone back and forth over those 10 years. But the one thing that has been consistent is the performance. So it's interesting to kind of.
And the last two things I'll say is because I know we all want to get out of here. So the first was the rest of the numbers, while I point out like, hey, we're at, oh, I don't know the first one. But I point out where we are versus the state, how we kind of track with those guys, it's great. Really, the goal is really to be better than the state,
Yes.
right? So while it's not a blind spot, it's not a negative blind spot. It really, we're not meeting what our expectations should be there either. Our expectations should be that we're doing better than the state.
And as a
Right.
leadership team, we talk about that regularly, so part of the process in improving all around was to really fold this in with our entire leadership team to really work on specifically what we're doing now, go through the charts, identify strengths, identify areas of need, and go through with a protocol for improvement. So how can we, as a leadership team, collaboratively work with our staffs across the district to help raise achievement?
And this comparison is probably, this is not the second thing I was gonna say, this comparison is probably the only thing I care about when it comes to this test. I don't care how we did versus last year or whatever. So that data is absolutely useless to me. This is the only data that, in my opinion, gives any true look into how we're actually performing as a district versus districts as a whole. And the last thing I want to say, and this was what I forgot, was, I think we can agree, particularly with math, that it's a building block topic. So if you have a great education in first grade, second grade, third grade, it builds. So I almost wonder, like, if we could correct that fourth grade, where would we be in fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, right? So we track kind of along with the state. Would our math numbers be actually better than the state if we could rectify that fourth grade issue? So that's the last thing I have to say.
Any other comments on that? Mrs. Winsper, could we go to grade 5 math, please? All right, we'll go all, Mrs. Winsper, if we could go through the remainder of the slides, then to get to up through up to the slide that says what has the NPS leadership team done? And again, just before, if there's anybody who wants to have a deeper conversation about this, I would welcome that. So what our leadership team was, I referenced this before, we're doing a DataWise protocol, and the DataWise protocol is run through Harvard University. We're all, many of us are doing an online course. We reviewed this data and we're talking about next steps. And what we're going to be doing as part of our leadership team on a monthly basis is make that purposeful time for data review, so that we're really looking at data from the same lens, developing a common language, and creating a real streamlined process that we can share that with our staffs. Next slide, please. And so a lot of these have kind of emerged. This was our initial analysis, so you see the pattern. We want to reframe the test as being important, but we do not want to create undue stress. And as alluded to earlier, the new evidence-based curricula, I think, is really gonna help with us. Next slide, please. And again, we're gonna continue with our pinpointed DART data use. And I think as came up here in our district leadership team meetings, we concur that the DART data doesn't always feel like an apples to apples comparison. Next slide, please. So again, we've covered a lot of this in terms of changes, level of emphasis, format, disruptions in learning, test design. So these results are not gospel, they're an opportunity for growth. Next slide, please. And just in terms of what steps have we have taken, the Office of Teaching and Learning for years has been really working aggressively. We have a series of new curricula that we're going to be onboarding. IMTSS is going to be central and pivotal to this role. And I think as came up earlier in the budget conversation, we're also going to be looking at all of our schedules to optimize time on learning. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to announce, this has been internal, but we did receive nearly a $200,000 grant from DESE for vacation, February and April for identified students for math acceleration academies. So it's going to run very much like the summer acceleration academies did, and that will be available for our neediest students in grades 3 through 10. So that's going to be a feather in our cap. Further, we're going to be looking at science and social studies curriculum adoptions, continue with IMTSS, have more professional development about database decision-making, and continue to provide those targeted early steps for students in need of support. And really, the last slide is about scheduling. We're going to continue to pound the pavement for every possible grant. And we're going to continue to have a comprehensive, detailed PD plan informed by our educators to help move us forward. So we are aware, we're on it, and we're going to see. And just, I always reference our strategic plan because that's us keeping eyes on the prize. And just, again, appreciate your time. Any follow-up, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I
Anybody
think,
have any-
just quickly to Dennis's point, like, I do agree the state average is good to look at, but I also do think looking at what other districts that are comparable according to the DART, I'm also kind of like you, I'm sick in the head that I have based on population size, based on what is comparable to Norton resident wise and tax purpose wise. I have it based on what we are as a school and population and everything else, and running it and looking at numbers per pupil, where are we testing at and everything else. You know, I had a few different schools, Amesbury, Belchertown, Bellingham, Dedham, Foxborough, Sandwich, towns around us, because we always get that question. Why does Mansfield and Easton have all this stuff? Per pupil rates, I have this all in here and just looking at it. My biggest concern, and I think again, from a data standpoint, is we're pretty normal and average when it comes to MCAS testing on every single facet of what we're doing. Now, normal and average is okay. We obviously, there's room for improvement, we can do better. And I think another huge piece of like looking at this and seeing it from like, how much are we spending per pupil? I think we really need to have a conversation with North Attleboro, because how the hell do they do what they do with the per pupil cost that they're doing it at? And I just didn't do just MCAS, I did SAT scores as well, and how they're getting one of the biggest bangs for their buck of their kids testing at a very, very high level with a very, very low, much lower than Norton per pupil cost. So like, I think that those are the areas that I would kind of like to see from the leadership team in terms of like, what districts are doing this really well? And again, what are they doing that, back to recreating the wheel? What can we do to kind of incorporate those and bring those into Norton to say, hey, listen, this is working really well in this district. North Attleboro, I know it's a little different, they're a little bit more populated than us, they're definitely more commercial. But their resident tax base and what they're doing is very closely similar to what we're doing here in Norton. And again, what are they doing better than us, and how are they doing it with less money per pupil, and how are they testing so much better, you know? And again, I think there's a few towns on here that I was like, oh, wow, like, their cost is really, really high. They're getting a whole ton of money to fund their per pupil cost, and their test scores are worse than us, you know? So I think like looking at that type of data and seeing it out on paper, I was kind of actually surprised. You know, even like we always talk about Easton and being, they kind of get everything funded for them. Easton's not really much crazier than we, like, they don't get a whole ton. That, I think per pupil cost, they're actually spending less per pupil than we do, you know? So what are they doing that they've gotten this glorified, we're putting them up here, we want to be like Easton, you know, they have everything going over there, the resident tax base is great, and like, why are they testing so much better? You know, on a same level where they're not getting more funding.
Nick, can I ask what the difference is between like a North Attleboro and us on for the student spending?
So North Attleboro, yeah, hold on. North Attleboro on per pupil spending. I will give you, this is from the state, so this is DART.
Is it 2021?
Some of them are 2021, some were
Yes.
updated, but on the ones I got, North Attleboro was 14, basically 14,000 and change per pupil, and Norton was 60.
Oh, so the information that I have from department, from the state, the FY 21 per pupil in district spending, Norton, we have 14,917. And let me pull up North Attleboro. It's hard because you look at different things, you get
Correct.
different data.
Yeah.
And that's,
So one caveat,
Mhm.
as you're looking at this, and we talked earlier about kind of
Yeah.
getting this per student spending. Some years ago, this is a while back, so I'm gonna, we went before, this, I'm trying to remember. Damn, it might have been there, it might have been before you, I don't remember, but, we went before, it was definitely Joe and I, went before the FinCom. And we're discussing the per pupil spending, and I said, you know, listen, if you look at the data. If you take the per pupil spending and you break it down. We have an inordinately large amount spent on, like in insurance and whatever.
Yeah.
So-
I remember that.
The per pupil spending, you have to call that out, because that's not gonna change. Whether or not I have, you know, I spend $2,000 or $200 on a teacher's benefits, isn't gonna change the education. So you really have to go, okay, well, what are we spending on learning? Not per pupil spending, because that's just a simple, you spend this, divided by that, and here's your number.
Yeah.
So be careful when we're looking at those numbers, because that, and I'm not suggesting that that's what's happening here, but, you know, be aware of that. That's, you know, and the other thing is too, like, I'll say this, and this is necessarily a popular topic, but sometimes the socioeconomic makeup of a town matters a lot too, you know, and I don't mean this like in the, they pay this, they pay that, whatever, but sometimes there's just, you know, education is just valued more at the home in one place than it is in another. And it's just the reality, you know, and that's true sometimes, like with an immigrant population where they value education, like it's just, it is what it is. So we may not like to hear that, but it's something to think about as well. So.
And I think, you know, one of the things that we discussed when we met as a leadership team, we were talking about the scores and data and all of these things. And what we reminded ourselves is we can't control any of those things that are outside the four walls. All we can control is what happens when our students are with us in the classrooms, 6.5 hours a day, and what we're doing with them. So it's really important that we're looking at instructional practice and some student supports and what the curriculum materials are. Because those are the things that we.
So when you give us a per pupil spending, we should call that. number out.
Absolutely.
You can keep it as a side note to it, but we really should be looking at what are we spending on people,
Not insurance.
not
Absolutely.
what do we spend per pupil, what do we spend on each pupil?
Absolutely. Great.
But yeah, anyway, I think like that's like. Because again, when you're looking at just test scores, there's so many other factors than just
There
test
are.
scores, you know?
Absolutely.
So it's like you have to layer that. And again, it's very hard to approach it in a way that makes sense to everybody, but like layering it from a standpoint of like, hey, yes, we are a little bit above or below Foxborough in this situation. However, Foxborough also spent whatever the number is, 2,500 more per pupil. That is also going to affect this. You know, Easton, they have all their kids in one elementary school. That's hugely helpful for blah, blah, blah. Like, I think all of that stuff is also very important in terms of just like, oh, here's the test score, here's the state, here's all of our districts. There's so much more into this. than
Without
just-
question,
than just, you know.
because with all of these data points, it's almost impossible to find true apples to apples. We do the best we can in terms of what's available. But really kind of to Jen's point earlier, like our focus is so pinpointed on teaching and learning. The new instructional materials, making sure that our SEL program really adopts well and adapts well and meshes well, because we have to remember, from a humanistic standpoint, we still have a lot of kids that are dealing with a lot of things. And it's really about being intentional and purposeful with our time and our resources. But having these conversations, and really, we've been doing this at the administrative level, and we're gonna continue to do it, is really gonna keep us laser focused on that movement, along with the continued evolution of our IMTSS system, to really get kids, they have a little bit of a struggle, the help that they need in an immediate sense.
And I think a perfect segue to our last topic is, like, I also looked at a huge portion of what we do in our residential tax. And this is where the town gets very confused. You compare Norton to like districts of Norton, not necessarily the schools. Norton has a higher residential tax by almost 40 cents per thousand. If you take the Norton schools versus other districts, we are 7 cents less on average. If you take Norton surrounding town area, the average is 12.81, Norton is 12.95. We're being taxed just like everybody else, and to ask the taxpayers to pay more money for some type of override that everyone keeps talking about is going to get shut down. It's straight there, it's going to get shut down again, that we really need to, I think, going back to the budget and saying, we really need to figure out what we're going to do in terms of how are we making up this 2.4 million, because I don't think it's coming.
My counter to that would be that most of the surrounding towns have a fairly decent business base.
Huge, correct. But again, we're riding the residential tax, and I've said this to Brian multiple times. We have to ride the residential tax and the residents and the taxpayers in town, because we don't have the commercial base that Mansfield, Foxborough, Easton, Bridgewater, whoever else has. We don't have it.
And we
So
probably never will.
we probably never will. No one wants it in
We're
their
not
backyard.
structured that way.
So it's either, your taxes either go up and you increase that tax rate, or the money's gonna stay the same, and we're going to really have to try to figure out where are we making up the $2.4 million, because to me, I don't think it's coming. The override is not now. Everyone just got their tax bill, look at it. My tax bill in 3 years has gone up a significant amount of money, that I just don't think this is gonna be the time to say, I know FinCom and Select Board are like, we need to have a united front. You're not gonna get a united front, if we didn't get a united front a few years ago, you definitely ain't getting it now, so I really, back to that conversation of the budget and that $2.4 million. I don't think we're anywhere, we're looking at cuts we're gonna have.
Yeah, what we need and what we can get are two different things.
I think the comment about the United Front though wasn't centered around just an override though. I think it was just, like Dinesh is talking about having these conversations, and because before, and years ago, it was contentious.
Yeah,
You know what I
it
mean?
was us versus them.
Right,
And-
exactly.
And I
And
say that
that's
from both
come,
sides. I mean,
right,
everybody
that's,
does ours.
that's come a long way. So I think that's what,
Yeah, the United Front is probably more on that, but, and you're absolutely right about that, and Nick's absolutely right, that I don't see the appetite for,
yeah,
but doesn't mean we can't have a conversation.
No,
yeah,
I
I mean,
think
that's what, right,
Zach, tell us, I think you said it perfectly. People want it, put it on the
Right,
ballot and see what happens.
happens.
I think we
Right.
also have to realize the reality of the situation.
well, we have to be
Probably not
prepared,
happening.
right, exactly. We have to be prepared.
And I think that was the point about showing you
Right, yeah,
those things.
right. And we in turn have to show the community, that's what we did.
If they, to the point, if they don't want it, or to Zach's point, if they don't want it, then at least we've had the conversation,
Right,
we know where we all stand.
right,
It's
yep,
okay, I can accept that.
right.
I can accept losing, I can't accept not playing.
I think it's one of those things where, give the people being the vote, give them all the information, now make a decision.
Right.
It shouldn't be,
Bingo.
campaigning for one side or another. It should just be, here's the facts of the
Right.
matter.
It's very
And if
simple.
it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, if it should come to light this year by whoever pushes it, more power to them if they take that on. But I think it's one of those things where, most departments are not gonna be relying on the fact that an override may or may not pass. If it happens, I will gladly accept the money that's.
Anyone
driven
who's
by it.
lying like that is a fool.
Yeah.
Like, it's-
All right, do we have any other business? Anybody else?
I do.
See,
No, not tonight, no. So I had a couple of community members approach me about
some things that they heard, and so I said I would be more than happy to bring it up to the committee, and so I don't know if you have answers tonight, or if it's something that you need to look into. But one of them was the grading policy for the high school, which I know was like a long, drawn out, I think, policy, right?
Yes,
That,
yeah.
that was I think before I think actually there was a vote, but I don't know if I actually voted in it. And so I didn't know, it had to do with that, like, if you don't submit any work, you could get a 50, I believe, I may be saying this.
No, you're on the right track.
Inappropriately,
It
right,
was,
right, something like
yeah.
that. But then I believe the final policy was, no, you have to you can't just get a 50 for not doing anything. There needs to be work submitted and whatever. So from my understanding is that from what this community member said, is that they were hearing and seeing that this wasn't actually happening and that 50s were being given without the work.
So I guess what I would say to anything along those lines
Yes.
is that the first line of conversation is always with the teacher.
Yeah.
If it's your child, or if it's always to the teacher and the guidance counselor, and then the high school administration. The other thing that they could do is to put something that's a little bit more specific.
Yep.
Into writing it and to share that. Again, I always highly recommend people go through that process.
Yeah.
Before they come to either the superintendent or the school committee. I think that's really important. But without other
I know,
details,
yes.
it's
Yeah.
really hard for me to say, oh, yes, or.
Yeah.
Justin, can I ask you a question? So it sounds like you're saying the policy we enacted is not being followed by some teachers,
Yes.
right? So I think your solution of go to the teacher first is, in this case, it's not somebody who's getting a 50, it's somebody who's saying, this person is getting a 50 and doing their work, it sounds like.
Mhm.
So I guess I would kind of just say, as a school committee, we pass policy. And I think the expectation from the 5 of us is that is followed.
Agreed.
I know damn right well that there are policies we pass that are not being followed. I know that for a fact. It bothers me. I don't say or do anything about it because I'm picking my battles. But again, we pass policy. The expectation is that that policy is followed
Absolutely.
by everybody. It is not, policies that we pass are not suggestions. If they were, they would be called suggestions, not policies. That's all I will say on that topic. But
And-
we are well aware that people are not always following.
And I think the other, I guess, if it's coming from someone who's not following the policy, I know this, like, there's a lot of things out there that are rumors and that are conversations, and it's really important that if you have a concern about something, in that case, it's about somebody that's not following it, because maybe it's not your child, but you believe other students are getting credit for work that was not done. That's a conversation like Dr. Dahlman, I believe that this is happening, this is taking place. And
I think it's one of those
he's the
things
best
where
person to kind of look into that.
to investigate it, someone needs to complain about it,
Yeah.
not just talk.
Yeah.
'Cause I mean, my daughter said something the other day, I'm like, oh, that's against such and such policy, and I mean, it wasn't her, it was another student that, whatever, but like, it wasn't a policy not being followed, but it was one of those things where my daughter's telling me, I'm like, well, that doesn't affect my kid. You know what I
Right.
mean, so maybe that's my error, is I don't report it. Stuff like that,
Yeah, and this is always a tricky one, because it's like, okay, we don't have a whole lot of information here. Is it a rumor? Is it real? Is it fake? We will never know unless this person comes forward and says this is what's happening. But at the same time, too, like, we've had this conversation too, it's like, we're elected officials, not that this has happened to me yet, well, it has happened to me, but not in this situation, but like, someone comes up to me and they're like expecting me to go and do something. So if it's like, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, hold on. I can do something about it. Is that a private phone call? Do we bring it up at the meeting? What's rumor? What's real? It's a difficult task being on the elected side, if you will, of like, where do we, when do we step in? Where do we bring it up?
Well, and I
I
think-
guess, right?
and
What's our function?
you know,
Right,
what
yeah.
I would always advise is to ask people to bring their concerns closer, I think, to the level that they can be handled. If the communication was, I know this is happening, I have evidence that this is happening, I went to the principal and they told me there's nothing they could do about it.
Yeah.
That's a different story,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
there's definitely a chain of.
Or they weren't gonna do anything about it, like whatever that was, or didn't email me back.
So Justine, just so, like, this has happened to me a number of times where people have expressed a concern, an opinion, and typically what I do is I would pick up the phone and call Jen. And just make her aware, because like, I don't want time to lapse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, in order for us to have a meeting, so I would just pick up the phone and talk to Jen and say, where do we go from here? This is what I'm being told, I need to get back to this person and give some kind of, solution or where to start, kind of thing.
It was this week, so that's why I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll just bring it up.
Yeah,
And it was not within 48 hours, so I was like, oh, okay, like, absolutely. I just thought because it was a policy that they were now talking about, that's where I felt like maybe, you know,
And this is the other slippery slope here too. The teacher not following the policy has nothing to do with us.
yeah.
Different,
Right. See,
quite frankly.
I think we don't have
no
enough
one.
information on this story.
Correct.
Yeah, and I
then-
didn't know it was this
Yeah.
week, but.
And I think this
sometimes
is where it
time
gets
of the
tricky.
essence.
Now I'm putting myself in my parents' shoes on. Again, I'm a little bit different if you haven't noticed. But like, I could also see parents, like, let's say a policy is being broken by Vinnie Searson, perfect example. He goes and breaks a policy. He goes and breaks a policy on us. We might not know about it. If a parent who's getting, the services and knows Vinnie very well or whatever, you don't want to make it into a thing of like, I don't want to be the person who's calling out Vinnie for that policy. If it's a principal, I don't want my kid to be targeted because I called him out on a policy thing.
Common.
So I think that's what happens, unfortunately, for us,
Common.
you know?
And people have, there are different relationships in town as well, right?
Yeah, for
So,
sure. And Vinnie probably doesn't break policy.
I was sure he was the first example, but.
Wasn't here.
I'll definitely throw them under the bus. And they are always welcome to call me or email me as well, and I will do my best to point them in the right direction and get an answer for them. So,
And I have a
You said-
great piggyback.
You said two though. Did you have another one?
Oh, do you have one more? Sorry.
I did. I just didn't know if we had a plan on following up with like the PBIS and how that's all going and the IMTSS and.
So PBIS, it will be presenting at the first meeting in February. They were originally scheduled for the 25th, but now that's a joint meeting. It's just not enough time. So they'll be at the first meeting in February. And then IMTSS, we're also gonna do a special education update. And potentially bring that into executive session, depending on, how much the committee really likes to have details. We'll probably do an IMTSS update in March, but I'll add that to my list. If that works for you.
Can we also, while we're speaking, future state meetings, talk and have the SROs come in for like their.
Yeah, so we'll do that in
triennial
executive session.
update? Yeah, that would be an executive session.
And I think another thing that, I do good, sorry.
Yeah.
Wonderful feels. So. I try to. I'm on, everyone knows, I'm on the Norton Youth Baseball Board, that's kind of how I see it, we do try to rent our field so often, whatever. Again, from our standpoint, it was always Norton High School, Norton Middle School, sports first, everyone's on the same page, I think everybody in town is on the same page, that's how it was presented. Then it was supposed to be youth sports, then.
Yeah. That's the problem, that is
The tier.
That is
That's
the tier.
Correct. Now, if you want to say tier policy, however, that's whatever, that's what we
That's
do.
how it goes to, that's how the Joel Alta feels in terms of preference or, priority.
Correct.
So when it comes to rec, it's, like, if baseball and soccer both wanted something and soccer put it in first, then soccer gets it.
That's how it goes. So I
Yes,
guess
in
my-
order of receipt, I guess.
Yes, so I guess I have two questions. One, we don't set procedure. Do we know what the procedure is in terms of, this is maybe completely out. If I wanted to start an Ultimate Frisbee Youth League in Norton, Mass, and I have all my insurance and I'm ready to go and I want to rent the fields, how do I do it? What do I do? who do I talk to? How do I get on the schedule? Whatever, that whole process. I'm like, and again, I'm assuming we have something, I don't know what it is. That whole process. And then number two, this is where I got a little irritated the other night with the Norton Youth Board. And it could be on us, it could be a 50-50, it could be 100% on Norton Youth and not on the schools. Baseball reaches out asking, hey, this is the date we need. We're also looking at these dates with no guarantee of like, we need Friday, June 10th for this, blah, blah, blah. They were just like, this is what we're kind of looking at. We're gonna have another meeting about it, and then we'll get you all the dates or whatever. There's already rentals in there for the summer. So, and
And the rentals are not town.
not town, they're paid rentals. Now, I get it. I don't care if we set the policy that all the youth teams have to have their things in by August 1st of the previous year. And then that next summer, August 1st, if your stuff is not in, you no longer get priority. You ran out of priority. But if we don't have, and maybe we do, but if we don't have like set dates and we're not telling these youth leagues who are, as everyone knows, run by parents and people trying to continue the sport and
volunteers,
keeping
yeah.
it alive and everything else, and have some type of rules and regulations in place. Like, okay, hey, we want June 15th for baseball and we can't get it because you already rented it out. Why would you have done that if we didn't get a first crack at it?
So, and typically the way, and I don't know the specifics
Correct.
around whatever you're asking.
Same.
A lot of times there are, and I'm only saying this from, I'm gonna put my parent hat on
Yep.
for a second, right? And the volunteering that I do for my own kids. Tournaments that are Columbus Day every year, right? So 5 years from now, we're still going to want to rent that field on Columbus Day. I don't know if it comes down, if how far in advance we allow
That's-
people, I
that's my
don't
question.
know, right? So I don't know
Yeah.
that. But we can look into that for you. But I think that it may be beneficial to put something like, you have to have your schedule, or you don't have to have your schedule, but like your date request for use probably pretty far in advance.
Yes.
Because one of the biggest things for us on these fields is being able to rent and to bring in money. Because as we're having conversations about budget, we know that the maintenance of these fields are extremely important. If we want to be able to continue using them, we need to be bringing in revenue as well. So we want to be able to rent out
Correct.
as much as we can. But we also want to make sure these are community fields, are open all the time for our families.
So it's a good point, right? Because if we say that we're giving priority to, schools first, town league second, and then private teams, whatever, third. If we don't actually have like a date set in, then it really is just first come, first serve.
Yeah.
And if I have a private team and I say, hey, I want to rent the field for the next 30 weekends, every year. Like, well, all right, well, I'm basically bumping my,
Everybody.
yeah, I mean, so should that be allowed? No, it probably shouldn't. So if these guys, if they want to do it Columbus Day every year, we should tell them, okay, we can tell you definitively on whatever the date is, August 1st, what our schedule's gonna be. If one of the town teams comes in, they get priority, so yeah, I mean, I think that probably makes a lot of sense to say, this is the time you have to submit your thing, because again, otherwise it's just first come, first serve.
And again, I live in this world. I rent a whole mess load of facilities and fields, and I totally get it. There's a lot of moving parts. Aaron has to go and make sure all the high school practices, then the
Yeah.
games, then the timing and all that stuff. So like, to me, what would make the most sense is once we get that schedule from, we know our practice schedule, generally speaking. We know we're going Monday through Friday, whatever, 3 to 6 for boys across, 6 to 8 for women's, or whatever it may be. You don't know your games. Once those games are set, and it's gonna take a while, you got data and put it into the calendar, make sure everything's going, like whatever. But to your point, if we normally get that from Tri-Valley League by mid-October. We give ourselves a month to get all that data imported. Starting November 15th through December 15th. We will do a quick meeting, a Zoom meeting with all the Norton youth leagues and say, hey, you have 1 month. By December 8th, you need to get us all your dates that you need requested, week times, everything else. After December 15th, we are renting these fields. Norton baseball keeps coming back crying, saying, oh, we forgot the date and rented out the tournament. Too bad, you messed up, So it just, and again, maybe we do have that process. I just haven't seen anything, and from what I'm gathering from Norton Youth Baseball, it kind of just seems like we're flying by the seat of our pants a little bit. And it just, to me, it's getting confusing. And it's infuriating when you look and you're like, wait a second, oh, we can't go Saturday morning to be rented out to a wooden bat. And it's like, wait a second, we didn't even get a chance to put our things in, you've already rented it out. And I think to the big Columbus Days and Father's Day, and Memorial Day tournaments, it's a very simple conversation to say, no, youth baseball, hey, listen,
No.
you get, no, well, no, that's not how it was presented, so you can't say no, but you can certainly look at them and say, hey, president of Norton Youth Baseball, we would really, really appreciate it. We're gonna make $9,000 off this rental on Memorial Day weekend. You guys could skip Memorial Day and use Lions Field or JCS Field, or come over here to the middle school, wherever, and find somewhere else to go. It would make a lot of money for Norton in our budget and helping us with maintaining and facilities and blah, blah, blah. I would say 95% of the time, those people are gonna go, not a problem. We know it in advance. We can make our schedule around it. You know,
But-
it's just, it's a give and a take. And it's not, whoever job is not to say, no, we're just renting the field. It is Norton Sports, Norton Youth Sports, then rentals.
Well, I mean,
That's how it was presented.
I know this is all new and we're still kind of going through the weeds on it, but I guess my counterpoint is if Norton Youth Baseball comes to the school the Friday before Memorial Day and that field's booked and they want it for Memorial Day
No, they're
tournament,
not kicking
you're out of
people
luck.
No, of course.
Correct.
You know,
That's why
I
I'm
mean,
saying
like,
that.
there has to be a date.
like
right,
an
time frame,
example,
time frame.
like from all my years in Norton Youth Soccer, you know, you have 9 Saturdays scheduled from the Saturday after Labor Day through and
Whatever.
And I would imagine baseball is the same way. So, I mean, it's gotta be a give and take, and I don't know, to your point, I don't know what that policy says, but we shouldn't be turning away anybody, but we also have to be cognizant of everybody else followed whatever policy is there and put in their rental request, so it's gotta be a give and take, like Norton Youth Baseball, you know, can't come to us or go to Wade or Aaron, whoever it is, like a month before the season and say, we need all these dates, because those contracts were probably signed 6, 7, 8 months.
You will not find a bigger person than a supporter of, once you missed your deadline, if Norton Youth
Snooze, you
Baseball,
lose.
you lose. That's too bad.
Yeah.
That's the way the world works. We've now rented the fields, but we gave you the chance. We told you, we communicated with you, we made sure that you were aware, we needed your dates by this time. If you don't get them in, too bad.
But I also think.
So
it's-
Jen, can I just say, this might be a bigger conversation. So
I think
it
so.
might be helpful to get the policy we're using now.
Yep.
And see if we actually have like a drop dead date for the future, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
I
take a
think
look
we
at
add this to the agenda.
Yeah, I think so
for
too.
another-
I think so too. I also think it's, we're running schools, and like, we can't be reaching out to youth leagues all the time and making sure that everyone understands, like, I think there has to be some responsibility on the youth league to
100%.
come to us.
Yeah.
We can't
Totally agree.
go to them and
Yeah.
say, hey, these are the dates.
But I think when,
We have
when
other
the
things
youth
to
league
do.
does reach out, I think it should be a quick PDF file of a one-page paper. Here's all our dates.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this year you missed them. Next year, here's the date.
Yeah.
This is the date.
No, I agree.
And it goes back to the whole, I remember last year when we had the Norton Youth Baseball opening day or whatever, and there was like chairs on the field. The schools, whether we, Wade, Aaron, Timmy, whoever, we never got any rules and regulations about what's can go on and off the turf. There was no sign on the thing. And I'm like, no offense, but how would you know, how does grandma who's coming down to watch their kid know that there's no chairs on the turf? No one tells them. And the league who's running it has no idea because no one told them either. So I just think, and again, I'm assuming there's some type of process and procedure in place.
Yeah.
That they go through. I just kind of want to see and look at it in terms of like, okay, how does this make sense and how does this all work before this gets into a bigger issue and then we
Well, I
have.
think we know more
Yeah.
now, right? We've had them
For sure,
longer.
for sure.
and
Right,
so
we've had a
It's
little
a
more, so
learning,
that's some reps with
right,
it.
it's a learning curve and I think that we just relook at that
Yeah.
policy,
and
revisit
We should,
this.
yeah, because
Yeah.
we did present
Yeah.
it a certain way.
Yeah.
And it would be unfortunate if we now were doing something different.
Right.
So we should
And alienating
look at the policy,
people.
talk about
Yeah,
it.
We,
get an
we do
agenda.
have a policy that we are writing rules down. We just haven't presented it to you yet. It doesn't have specific dates that you need to have dates in by here in order for a rec to get it. That's something we can absolutely add now because we know it's gonna be an issue. Because we're learning curve.
Yeah.
We just started, we waited, we wanted to see how the year went, like the ebbs and flows of it,
It's
who
really the
needed
first
it.
full year,
And
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
March
right?
last year was
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
when we
So-
In
started
another piece. of
charging.
this, Once all that's done, and you have those schedules in.
I was gonna look
in, we can go back to these private companies and say, hey,
Yeah.
here's our schedule.
Right,
Pick whatever days you want. We're willing to rent.
You can have, and you can all.
Right.
And and
Everyone.
the $51,000 or what, 44,000, whatever we made up to last year, all of a sudden that number goes to 150, 100, because, I mean, I'm renting fields right now at Ryan for a youth league who they're just coming on our field and using them at night. Like, there's no reason why we couldn't have that happen.
Right.
And we're making money right now in 40-degree weather, you know? So I think like, ultimately, I think we just need some type of a little bit more
Yep.
wording out on the website. Hey, if you want to rent these, this is where you need to go. This is what you need to do. And then hopefully over time, like, we'll be able to follow.
So why don't we add that to the agenda in
Yes,
February, because
yeah.
the 25th is.
Yeah, no,
this is a
yeah.
short month, so I think that sounds good, we'll do that.
Okay, all right, cool.
Awesome.
Anything else, you guys?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.